Section 1. The town that time forgot. Close your eyes for a moment. Or don't keep them half open the way you do when the room is dark and the screen is dim and the world outside has gone quiet. Either way, let your body go a little slack. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension you've been carrying since this morning settle somewhere softer. You don't have to fix anything right now. You don't have to respond to anyone. You just have to listen. We're going somewhere tonight. Somewhere you've probably been before, even if you've never thought of it as a place you'd visit on purpose. We're going to a town in America that doesn't exist on any map, that has no official zip code, that sits in a state that no one can quite name, and that has been standing somehow for over 30 years without anything in it fundamentally changing. The roads are always the same. The diners are always open. The nuclear plant on the edge of town keeps humming, and the smoke rises from its towers in those familiar twin columns, and the people who live there go about their lives with the particular rhythm of people who have never once asked why things are the way they are. The town is called Springfield. You already know it. You've known it most of your life, probably. It entered your imagination when you were young enough that it got woven in with everything else, with cartoons and Saturday mornings and the particular comfort of something playing in the background while you ate cereal. And that's actually part of what makes it interesting, part of what makes it worth spending a night with. Springfield feels familiar in a way that goes deeper than simple recognition. It feels like a place that exists in some half-remembered part of your childhood, right next to the other towns you invented or absorbed from stories, the ones with the corner stores and the friendly neighbors, and the sense that nothing truly terrible could ever happen, even when something terrible is absolutely happening. That familiarity is a kind of magic trick, and tonight, gently, slowly, we're going to look at how the trick works and what's underneath it. Springfield first appeared on television in 1989, though the family at its center had already existed in shorter animated segments for a couple of years before that. The show built its world gradually, the way all good fictional places are built, by adding one detail at a time, one storefront, one side character, one quietly strange piece of lore, until the town became something denser and stranger than any single episode could contain. The creators didn't sit down and design every alley and institution from the start. Springfield grew. It accumulated. It became more itself over time, the way real towns do, except that real towns also change, and Springfield, crucially, does not. We'll come back to that. The question of why nothing in Springfield ever truly changes is one of the most fascinating rabbit holes in the entire mythology of the show. But for now, just let that idea sit somewhere in the back of your mind while I tell you what kind of place Springfield actually is. It is, on the surface, the most ordinary town in America. It has a downtown area with a main street. It has a bar, Moe's Tavern, that functions as the center of its social gravity for a certain kind of person. It has a church and a school and a nuclear power plant and a river and a bridge and a tire fire that has been burning for decades, and somehow no one has put it out or seems particularly bothered by it. It has a hospital and a police department and a mayor's office and a town hall and a shopping mall. It has the basic infrastructure of American civic life rendered in bright yellow and blue, and the particular visual language of late 20th century animation. And then, if you look a little closer, you start to notice the other things, the things that don't quite fit. The power plant isn't just big. It's the kind of big that belongs in an industrial dystopia, a facility so massive and so poorly maintained that it has been the site of more safety violations than any real nuclear facility in American history could survive. Before being shut down, its owner is a man of indeterminate ancient age who may have been alive since the early days of the 20th century, who keeps a personal graveyard of former employees, who once literally blocked out the sun over the entire town without anyone being able to stop him. And the man who works the safety controls at this facility, the last line of defense between Springfield and nuclear meltdown, is someone who won his job in a contest, who falls asleep at his station with a regularity that should be statistically impossible, and who has, on multiple occasions, been directly responsible for near-catastrophic events that the town then simply absorbed and forgot about. The river that runs through Springfield glows sometimes. The fish that come from it have extra fins and unusual colors. There is a three-eyed fish that became briefly famous, nationally famous, and then was forgotten. The children of Springfield catch these fish and throw them back, and don't ask questions. The elementary school is run by a principal whose entire identity turned out, in one devastating episode, to be a fabrication, a persona adopted by a man who was not who he said he was, whose real name no one uses, whose past was erased and replaced so completely that when the truth came out, the town voted to forget it and restore the lie. Because the lie was more comfortable. Because Springfield, above all things, prefers comfort to truth. And then there's the family at the center of all of it. The Simpsons live in a house on Evergreen Terrace, a street in a neighborhood that feels like every neighborhood from every American suburb you've ever seen in a movie or a dream. The house is yellow, the family is yellow. Their skin is the color of cartoon sunshine. And for 30-plus years, various people have wondered why. And the answers that have been offered range from the mundane to the deeply unsettling. We'll get to that too. Homer Simpson works at the power plant. He is a large man with a limited attention span and an enormous appetite, and a laugh that has become one of the most recognized sounds in the history of television. He loves his wife. He loves his children, even when he forgets to show it, even when his behavior suggests something closer to obliviousness than love. He is, in many ways, the least heroic protagonist in the history of animated television. Clumsy, selfish, impulsive, occasionally cruel, and he is also somehow deeply sympathetic. You understand Homer even when you shouldn't. That's part of the trick. Marge Simpson is the conscience of the household, and in many interpretations, the emotional anchor of the entire town. She has blue hair famously, improbably blue, a tower of hair that she maintains through what must be sheer determination, and she has a patience that borders on the supernatural, and she has, beneath all of that, a rich inner life that the show has spent decades slowly revealing. Marge wanted things. Marge had ambitions and fears and desires that extended well beyond her kitchen. The show sometimes let her pursue them. More often, it put her back where she started. That tension between who Marge is and what Springfield allows her to be is one of the quiet tragedies running under the surface of every episode. Bart Simpson is 11 years old. He has been 11 years old since 1989. He will be 11 years old when the show eventually ends, whenever that is, and he will never experience puberty or high school or the particular confusion of becoming an adult. He is frozen in the amber of early adolescence, mischievous, brave, loyal to a specific and narrow code, terrified of vulnerability in the way that only people who have been hurt are terrified of vulnerability. He spray paints walls and he skateboards and he calls his father by his first name, and he is, at his core, a child who wants to be seen and taken seriously by a world that keeps treating him as a punchline. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old. She plays the saxophone. She is a vegetarian and an activist and a Buddhist and a feminist and a gifted student in a school that is not equipped to handle gifted students. She sees Springfield with more clarity than anyone else in it. She understands on some level the strangeness and the sadness of the place where she lives. And she stays. She always stays. That's the interesting thing about Lisa. She has every reason to leave, and she never does. And we're never quite sure if that's love or something closer to paralysis. Maggie is the baby. Maggie does not speak. Maggie watches everything. We will spend a great deal of time on Maggie later in this narration, because Maggie is, in certain readings of the show's mythology, the most important character in the entire story. But that is a story for another section. Tonight, let this be your introduction. Let this be the moment you sit with the idea of Springfield, this impossible, familiar, deeply strange town, and let it wash over you the way a story washes over you when you're half asleep and not quite defending yourself against it. The town is there. The lights are on in the houses. The power plant is humming. The tire fire is burning. And somewhere in the dark, the Simpsons are home. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Somewhere out there, it's 3 a.m. and someone's got this playing while they stare at the ceiling. And somewhere else, it's a lazy Sunday afternoon and someone's got the curtains drawn and the blankets pulled up. Whatever your situation, we're glad you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so you never miss a video like this one. Section 2. The nuclear heart burns, the plant, and what it actually means. Let your breathing slow a little more. If you've been holding tension anywhere in your jaw, in your hands, in the place between your shoulder blades where stress likes to hide, just let it go. You don't have to do anything with it, just set it down. The Springfield nuclear power plant sits at the edge of town like a monument to something that no one has quite named. It has two cooling towers that release steam in slow, continuous plumes, and it has a perimeter fence, and it has a parking lot full of cars that belong to people who, in many cases, took the job because there weren't other options and stayed because leaving seemed like too much trouble. It is a workplace, and it is also in the symbolic language of the show something more than a workplace. It is the engine of Springfield. It is the reason the town exists in the form that it does. And it is run by a man who might be the closest thing the fictional world has ever produced to an actual villain, Charles Montgomery Burns. Mr. Burns, Springfield's wealthiest resident, its most powerful citizen, and one of the most elaborately developed antagonists in the history of American television. He is ancient. Precisely how ancient is one of the show's recurring mysteries, but he has memories that stretch back to the early 20th century. He has mentioned Woodrow Wilson as a contemporary, has referred to events from the First World War with the casual familiarity of personal recollection, has displayed objects and made references that suggest he has been alive for somewhere between 100 and 130 years. He is thin to the point of structural impossibility. His eyes are small and pale, and they contain, most of the time, an expression somewhere between contempt and the particular blankness of someone who stopped being surprised by the world a very long time ago. Burns owns the plant. He has owned it for decades longer, possibly than the town itself has existed in its current form. The plant is not just his source of income, it is his instrument of control. Springfield runs on the electricity generated by the plant's reactor, which means that the entire town is, in a very literal sense, dependent on Burns for its most basic infrastructure. When Burns threatened to block out the sun, and he did, in one of the show's most famous episodes, he was making explicit a power dynamic that had always been implicit. He could take the light away. He has always had that option. The town has always known it on some level, even if the town has also developed the remarkable ability to not think about it. The plant itself is a character. It appears in the background of so many scenes that it becomes part of the visual grammar of Springfield. Those two towers, that perimeter, that glow. And it is, by every measure the show has ever applied to it, extraordinarily dangerous. The safety record at the Springfield plant would be considered a fiction in any real-world context. Nuclear facilities in the actual world operate under regulations so strict that a single violation can result in federal investigations, massive fines, and potential shutdown. The Springfield plant has had violations so numerous and so severe that the show stopped counting them, and the regulatory agency responsible for overseeing it has been depicted as comically ineffective, easily bribed, or simply absent. Homer Simpson is, officially, a safety inspector at the plant. He works in Sector 7G. His job is to monitor the reactor's operational systems and respond to any anomalies that might suggest a safety problem developing. He is, by virtually every measure the show has applied to him, not good at this job. He sleeps at his station. He has caused accidents. He has misunderstood basic procedures. He won the position not through qualifications, but through a sequence of events involving a cartoon mascot and a labor dispute that is genuinely complicated to explain, but boils down, essentially, to the fact that Homer was in the right place at the right time, which is how most things in Homer's life seem to work. And yet, the plant has not exploded. Springfield has not been evacuated. The reactor hums along, and the steam rises from the towers, and the glow in the river continues, and life goes on. There are a few ways to think about this. One is that the show is a cartoon, and cartoons don't have to be realistic, which is true but not very interesting. Another is that the plant's continued operation, despite Homer's negligence, is a deliberate joke about the gap between how dangerous nuclear power actually is and how casually Americans treat it, which is a more interesting reading. But the most interesting reading, the one that fits with the deeper mythology of Springfield, is that the plant is being held together by something other than competence. Burns, for all his villainy, is not stupid. He has survived for over a century in a world that kills people much faster than that, and he has done so by being, in his own particular way, enormously capable. He has an assistant, Smithers, whose devotion to Burns is one of the show's most complex and quietly affecting relationships, whose job includes, among many other things, making sure that the plant actually functions. Whatever failures occur at the operational level, whatever Homer does or doesn't do at his console, There are systems below the surface that keep things working. Burns doesn't need Homer to be good at his job. Burns needs Homer to be present. The distinction matters. There's a theory about this that has circulated in the fan community for years, and it goes like this. Homer's role at the plant is not actually to prevent accidents. It is to be the person who causes them. Think about it from Burns's perspective for a moment. If you run a nuclear facility, and that facility causes harm, radiation leaks, ecological damage, health effects in the surrounding community, you need someone to blame. You need a lightning rod. Homer Simpson, with his documented incompetence and his long history of safety violations, is a perfect lightning rod. Every accident that can be traced back to Homer is an accident that cannot be traced back to Burns. Homer's incompetence is not a liability for Burns. It is an asset. This theory is never stated explicitly in the show. It may not be the intended reading, but it fits. It fits with Burns's character, with the particular cold pragmatism that drives everything he does, and it fits with the way the show has always treated Homer's job, which is to say, as a source of comedy that never quite resolves into actual consequences. Homer fails upward. He fails constantly and spectacularly, and then resets to his position in Sector 7G, and the plant keeps running, and Burns keeps watching from his office at the top of the building. Burns's office deserves its own moment. It is high up in the plant, accessible by an elevator that requires specific security clearances, and it looks out over Springfield with the particular vantage point that the show consistently associates with power. Burns can see the town from there. He can watch it. He can observe the movements of its citizens with the detached interest of someone who has long since stopped thinking of those citizens as fully real. He has a model of Springfield on his desk, or he has had in various episodes, and there are moments when he manipulates it with the casual authority of someone who believes, with complete sincerity, that he owns what he's looking at. He has, at various points in the show's history, attempted to destroy Springfield's way of life in ways that go beyond simple greed. The sunblocking scheme is the most famous example. The reasoning behind it forcing residents to pay for artificial light, electricity generated by the plant rather than sunlight, is so nakedly villainous that it reads as parody, and on one level it is, but on another level, it is a precise and accurate description of how monopoly power actually works. If you control the only source of something people need, you can charge whatever you want. Burns tried to do this with light itself. That he failed is the show's concession to the genre requirements of a family comedy. That he tried is the show's actual argument. Burns has also had moments of vulnerability. This is important. He is not simply a machine of malevolence. There are episodes in which he reaches towards something like human connection and is met with confusion or rejection or his own inability to sustain the warmth required. He had a childhood that was, by any measure, devastating, taken from his family at a young age, raised by a man who was not kind to him, shaped by circumstances that turned whatever softness he might have had into the diamond-hard self-interest that characterizes him as an adult. The show has visited that childhood in flashback. It has shown us the small boy who would become the ancient magnate, and it has asked us to understand, if not forgive, how he got from there to here. There is also the matter of Burns's health. He is, medically speaking, a mystery. He has been described in the show as having virtually every disease known to science, simultaneously, in quantities that should kill him, and yet they cancel each other out, apparently, the organisms competing for space in his body in a way that produces a kind of accidental equilibrium. He has survived things that should kill him. He has been shot and recovered. He has fallen from heights and recovered. He has faced financial ruin and recovered. He seems, in some fundamental way, unkillable, or at least resistant to death in a way that goes beyond simple cartoon logic and into something stranger. Some fans have suggested that Burns's longevity is connected to the plant itself, that the radiation, the ambient, constant, low-level radiation that must emanate from a facility like that, has done something to him over decades of exposure. Not killed him, changed him, made him something that isn't quite what he started as. This is speculation, obviously, but it rhymes with things the show does more explicitly with other characters, and we will come to those in time. For now, let the plant sit in your imagination. Those two towers against the sky, the hum of the reactor, The river catching some of that glow and carrying it downstream past the families who fish in it on Saturday mornings without a second thought. The plant is the heart of Springfield. And like many hearts, it keeps beating not because it's healthy, but because stopping is the one thing it doesn't know how to do. Let yourself get a little heavier now. If you're lying down, feel the weight of the mattress beneath you, the particular give of it under your back or your side. The story is here. It's not going anywhere. Let your eyes close if they want to. The town is still there even when you're not looking at it. It has been there for 30 years and it will be there when this night is over. Burns is still in his office. The plant is still humming. The steam is still rising. Let the sound of it be like white noise. Let it be like rain. We'll move on when you're ready. Section 3. The yellow skin question. What the color actually tells us. There is something you've looked at thousands of times without quite registering it as strange. The people in Springfield are yellow, not the yellow of illness, not the yellow of a bruise, but the pure, untroubled yellow of a child's crayon, of the sun in a drawing, of something meant to signal warmth and simplicity. Every human being in Springfield has this skin tone. It is consistent across races, across ages, across every background and heritage. In a show that has depicted characters from dozens of countries and cultures, every human being is rendered in that same flat, particular yellow. For most of its history, the show has treated this as a non-issue. It is a visual choice, one of the most recognizable visual choices in television history, and the in-universe characters behave as though they are not yellow, as though the color is simply what skin looks like, unremarkable, ordinary. There are no mirrors in Springfield that reflect the yellow back at the characters as strange. There are no outsiders who comment on it with surprise. The original reasoning, as far as anyone can pin down a single definitive explanation, had to do with the practicalities of early animation. The creator wanted a color that would immediately catch the eye of someone channel surfing, that would announce itself from across a room as something distinct. Yellow was that color. It was functional. It was a branding decision as much as an aesthetic one. But the show has also, over the decades, suggested other things, has opened doors to other interpretations without always walking through them. Let's walk through them now. The most straightforward, unsettling interpretation is the radiation theory. Springfield has a nuclear power plant that, by the show's own accounting, has been leaking radiation into the environment for decades. The river glows. The fish have mutations. The birds that circle the plant are sometimes described in ways that suggest they are not entirely normal birds. If radiation can change the color of river fish, if it can give a fish a third eye, what might it do to the human beings who have lived in proximity to it for generations? The yellow in this reading is not a design choice, or rather, it is a design choice that is also an in-universe truth. The people of Springfield are yellow because they have been absorbing trace amounts of radiation their entire lives, and the radiation has deposited itself in their skin the way certain minerals deposit in bone, the way certain metals accumulate in tissue. They are colored by their environment. They carry the plant with them, on them, visible in their skin. This would mean that the yellow is not actually a sign of health. It is a sign of contamination. Gentle, chronic, unacknowledged contamination that has been ongoing for so long that it now reads as normal reads, in fact, as the definition of normal in Springfield, because there is no one in Springfield who doesn't have it. There are no uncontaminated humans left to provide a contrast. Everyone is yellow. Everyone has always been yellow. The question doesn't arise. Think about what that would mean for the people of Springfield. They are living in a contaminated environment. They are showing physical signs of that contamination. And they have, through a combination of habituation and what might be called deliberate not looking, arrived at a place where none of this is remarkable to them. The contamination has become their baseline, their normal, their home. This is not actually an outlandish thing for a town to do. Towns have done versions of this. There are real places in the real world where industrial pollution has been ongoing for so long that it has become invisible to the people who live there, not because they're stupid, but because the human capacity for adaptation is enormous, and because the economic and social costs of acknowledging the contamination often feel too large to pay. It's easier to fish in the river than to not fish in the river. It's easier to drink the water than to fight the decades-long battle that would be required to clean it. Springfield is, in this reading, every American town that ever decided it was easier to look away. But the yellow skin theory has a complication, which is that characters who come to Springfield from elsewhere are also depicted as yellow. Visitors, tourists, characters who have never lived near the plant, they are yellow too. This would seem to undermine the radiation theory until you remember that the show is not a documentary. It is a cartoon. The visual grammar applies to all human figures because the visual grammar is the visual grammar. The yellow does not necessarily mean that every character in every episode has been contaminated. It means that the show has a consistent visual style that renders human skin as yellow. And within that style, the contamination theory is a possibility the show is willing to entertain without being obligated to confirm. What the show does confirm, repeatedly and specifically, is that Springfield's environment is toxic. The river contains heavy metals and radiation and fish mutations. The air near the plant carries particulates. The groundwater has been affected. There is a section of the show's history dedicated to episodes about environmental crises in Springfield that reads, cumulatively, like a documentation of a genuine public health disaster that no one is addressing because the political will to address it has been captured by the one entity powerful enough to produce it. Which brings us back to Burns. The yellow skin is Burns' doing, in a sense. Not intentionally or not entirely intentionally, but the environment that produces the glow in the river and the mutations in the fish and the ambient contamination that touches everything in Springfield is Burns' plant. Burns built it. Burns runs it. Burns has consistently resisted safety upgrades and environmental compliance and every regulatory attempt to make the plant operate more cleanly because those upgrades and that compliance cost money, and Burns' primary orientation toward the world is extractive. He takes. He does not give back. He does not restore what he has depleted. The yellow skin of Springfield is, in this reading, a record of everything Burns has taken without replacing. It is the town wearing its history on its body. It is the visible residue of decades of a particular kind of corporate relationship between a powerful entity and the community that depends on it. There is something almost beautiful about that idea, even as it is terrible. Springfield literally glows with the light of the plant. The people are colored by their proximity to power. They carry that power with them, distributed through their skin, made part of their physical appearance. They cannot separate themselves from the history of the thing that powers them. There's another theory about the yellow that goes in a slightly different direction, and this one is more about symbolism than science. In the visual language of cartoons and comics, yellow is often associated with warmth, with friendliness, with accessibility. It is the color of the sun. It is the color of happiness in a kindergarten classroom. It is the color you reach for when you want to signal something cheerful. The creator of the show was making, at one level, a story about the American family specifically, the American family as it existed in the late 1980s, with all the complexity and dysfunction that the sitcom format of that era was just beginning to acknowledge. The Simpsons were, in their first iteration, supposed to be an antidote to the idealized family of shows like The Cosby Show, messy, imperfect, real in the ways that idealized families aren't. They were supposed to be a family you recognized. And yellow in this context is a way of marking them as familiar without marking them as specifically anything. The yellow is a kind of visual universality. When you make characters yellow, you are implicitly saying that they are not white, not black, not any specific ethnicity or race. They are simply human, abstracted to their most universal form. This was, the creator has said, part of the intention. Though the show's execution of that intention is complicated by the fact that its voice cast was, historically, entirely white, and by the fact that characters coded as non-white were often given different skin tones, while the default coding of the main characters reads, in animation context, as white. The yellow is doing multiple things at once. It is a branding choice and a contamination theory, and a universality gesture, and a historical relic of decisions made in 1989. That the show has lived with ever since. It is one of those details that rewards looking at precisely because it has so many layers. For tonight, just let the image sit with you. Yellow people in a yellow-lit town, living near a facility that has been coloring their world for as long as anyone can remember. They don't see it as strange, because they've never seen themselves any other way. They go to work, and they raise their children, and they barbecue in their backyards, and they fish in the glowing river, and they are, by and large, content, or they perform contentment. We'll come back to that distinction. Let your body get a little heavier. Feel the bed, the couch, the chair, whatever surface is holding you right now. Feel how it supports you without asking anything of you. The night is quieter now. The story is getting deeper, and the deeper it goes, the more comfortable you can let yourself become, because you don't have to figure anything out. You just have to listen. The yellow people of Springfield are sleeping in their houses. The plant is humming. The river is carrying its glow down toward wherever rivers in Springfield go. And somewhere in that town, someone is telling a story. Section 4. Homer's Coma, the theory that rewrites everything. This is one you might have heard before, in fragments, in the corner of an internet conversation, in a video you half-watched while you were doing something else. But I want to tell it to you properly. I want to give it the space it deserves, because if you follow it all the way through, it changes the way Springfield feels. The theory is this. Homer Simpson has been in a coma since approximately 1992. Let me tell you where that date comes from. In 1993, the show aired a segment one piece of a larger episode titled Homer's Triple Bypass. In this segment, Homer suffers a heart attack and requires open-heart surgery. The surgery is performed by a doctor who is, by the show's own accounting, not particularly good at his job. Homer goes under anesthesia. The surgery is depicted as going through complications. And then Homer is fine. He wakes up, he recovers. Life continues. The coma theory suggests that Homer did not, in fact, recover. That the surgery went wrong, more wrong than the show depicts, and that Homer's brain was deprived of oxygen for long enough to produce a coma, or a coma-adjacent state, or some kind of profound neurological event that separated Homer's conscious experience from reality. Everything that happens in the show after that point, in this reading, is Homer's coma dream. The increasingly bizarre, physically impossible, logically inconsistent events of the show's later seasons are not the show becoming more absurd. They are Homer's dreaming mind becoming less tethered to the rules of the world he used to live in. Now, there are a few things worth examining here. First, the timing. The coma theory uses the 1993 surgery as its origin point, but some versions of the theory go earlier, to the 1992 episode in which Homer is electrocuted, or an even earlier episode in which he sustains various head injuries. The choice of origin point matters for the theory because it determines which seasons of the show are real and which are dream. If you use the 1992 electrocution, almost the entire show is a dream. If you use the 1993 surgery, you have a few seasons of real content before the dream takes over. The evidence for the theory accumulates across the later seasons in ways that are interesting to trace. The later seasons of the show are noticeably more absurd than the early seasons. In the early seasons, the show's humor comes from recognizable human situations rendered with cartoon exaggeration. In the later seasons, the show deploys reality in a much more elastic way. Homer travels internationally with improbable ease, encounters celebrities in contexts that strain credulity, has adventures that bear little relationship to the life of a nuclear plant safety inspector in a mid-sized American city. The show's tonal register changes. The world becomes more dreamlike. This is, obviously, also just what happens when a show runs long enough. Writers change. Cultural moments demand responses. The format bends. But the coma theory offers a different explanation for the same observation. What looks like a show losing its grip on reality is actually a depiction of a man losing his grip on reality. Homer's dream gets less coherent over time because dreams do that. They start with the recognizable architecture of the life you lived, and then they start to warp, to substitute, to produce landscapes that follow dream logic rather than waking logic. In a coma dream, you would likely populate the world with the people you love. You would keep them close. You would dream about your wife, your children, your friends, your familiar places. You would keep the broad shapes of your life intact, because those shapes are what your mind returns to when it is trying to orient itself. Homer's coma dream is populated by Marge and Bart and Lisa and Maggie, by the house on Evergreen Terrace, by Moe's Tavern, by the power plant. The shapes of his life are there. The content becomes increasingly strange. There's something deeply sad about this version of the story, and I want to sit with that for a moment because it's worth feeling. If Homer is in a coma, then the Homer we see on the show is not really there. He is not really eating those donuts or going on those adventures or hugging his children or having those flashes of insight that come to him sometimes unexpectedly in the middle of an ordinary day. He is lying in a hospital bed in Springfield somewhere, and his body is being kept alive by machines, and his mind is producing this elaborate, loving, sometimes terrifying dream of the life he would have wanted. And Marge is there, at the bedside. This is almost certainly what she's doing in the reality outside the dream, sitting with him, talking to him, reading to him, because people who love coma patients do those things. They talk to them because they don't know what the person can hear, and they cannot bear the alternative assumption. So Marge talks, and Homer, in his dream, hears her voice and incorporates it into the dream as the Marge he loves, the Marge who is always there, the Marge who never gives up on him even when he has given her every reason to. Marge's blue hair, in the dream, is exactly as improbable as it is in the waking world. But in a dream, you keep the things you love without needing to explain them. Homer loves Marge's hair. Of course, the dream keeps it. And the children, Bart and Lisa, grow older in the real world, they must. Time passes, children age, but in the dream they stay the same, 11 and 8, forever. Because Homer's mind is frozen at a particular moment of their childhoods, the moment before the surgery, and it cannot advance the children past the point it last knew them. The dream produces them as they were, not as they are becoming. And Homer can have them with him, always, the way parents sometimes wish they could keep their children young forever, preserved in the moment when they were small enough to hold. Maggie is the most interesting case. In the coma theory, Maggie is the child Homer never quite got to know. She was an infant when the surgery happened. He knew her least. And in the dream, she stays an infant, always there, always close, always watching him with those enormous eyes, because that is as far as Homer's knowledge of her extends. He can dream her, but he cannot evolve her because he does not have the raw material of a relationship with her to build from. This is why Maggie doesn't speak. In the waking world, she has grown up. She has learned language. She has become someone. But Homer doesn't know who that someone is, and the dream cannot produce what the dreamer doesn't have access to. There is an episode, and this is a real episode, not a fan invention, in which Maggie does speak, just once. A single clear word at the end of a particular storyline, and the word is Daddy. The episode is designed so that the word is almost impossible to hear unless you know to listen for it. It is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the entire show. And in the coma theory, it is not Maggie in the dream speaking. It is the real Maggie, grown up now, standing by the hospital bed, speaking to her father who cannot wake up. The dream catches the word. The dream delivers it back to Homer as if it came from his baby daughter. Daddy. Let me tell you something about sleep. When you are sleeping and someone speaks to you, sometimes the sound makes it into your dream. Not the meaning of it, not the full content, but the sound, the voice, the emotional tenor of the words. The dream incorporates the external world imperfectly, partially. The way water incorporates a pebble, it moves around it, shapes itself to it, lets it in without being clear about what it has let in. Homer's coma dream is doing that. It is letting in fragments of the world outside Marge's voice, his children's voices, the sounds of the hospital, and converting them into dream material. Every visit from a loved one becomes a new plot. Every conversation at the bedside becomes a new episode. The dream never ends, because the people who love Homer keep coming. They keep talking to him. They keep giving him material. The theory cannot be proven. The show has never confirmed or denied it, which is either evidence of deliberate ambiguity or of the simple fact that the coma theory is a fan construction projected onto a show that didn't intend it. Both things can be true. A story can be constructed in a way that makes a theory possible without ever intending that theory. The coma theory works because it describes the show accurately. It explains the things that are hardest to explain, and that is enough for it to live in the conversation around Springfield. What I find most interesting about the coma theory is not the question of whether it's true. It is the emotional truth it points toward. The coma theory, if you accept it, tells you something real about Homer Simpson. It tells you that his deepest self is oriented around his family, that if his mind were to produce a world in extremis, in the place between life and death, it would produce Marge. It would produce Bart and Lisa and Maggie. It would produce the house on Evergreen Terrace and the yellow walls of the kitchen and the smell of something burning because Marge has left something on the stove and the dog has gotten into something and everything is mildly chaotic but deeply, unmistakably home. Homer Simpson, stripped of everything else, dreams about being home with his family. That is not a small thing. For a character who has been called selfish and stupid and oblivious for 30 years, that is not a small thing at all. Let your own mind relax now. Let it do what minds do in the late hours. Let it wander. Let it find its own shapes. If you are thinking about the people you love, let those thoughts be easy. Let them be warm. Let them be the dream you'd choose if choosing were possible. Springfield is out there in the dark. Homer is asleep in one sense or another. And the town keeps going, the way towns do, the way dreams do, finding its own logic as it rolls through the night. Section 5. Who really shot Mr. Burns? The mystery the show left open. You might remember. You might have been a child when it aired, or you might have found it later, in reruns or streaming, or the particular way that certain episodes of television become so culturally embedded that you absorb them without ever quite sitting down to watch them. The cliffhanger at the end of the show's 5th season, the 2-part episode, Who Shot Mr. Burns?, is one of the most famous moments in American television history. Not because of how it resolved, but because of how it was constructed. Burns was shot. At the conclusion of the first part, Burns collapsed in the town square, shot once, and no one could immediately say who had done it. The episode was constructed as a mystery, explicitly referencing the conventions of murder mysteries and detective fiction, and it invited viewers to guess. There was a phone line. There were clues embedded in the episode. There was a sweepstakes. The show, with enormous confidence, asked its audience to become detectives. The answer, when it came in the season premiere, was Maggie. It was Maggie Simpson, the baby, the smallest and most silent member of the family, the one who never speaks, who only watches. She had shot Mr. Burns. In a scene that played as equal parts revelation and comedy, it was established that Maggie had obtained Burns's gun during a struggle in which Burns, who had stolen candy from a baby, in the most literal possible way, was reaching into the family's car and had seized Maggie's lollipop. The gun went off. The baby shot the old man. The show played this for comedy. The resolution was comedic. A baby did it, which is absurd, which is funny, which fits the show's register. And most of the episode's plot about the investigation collapsed into confusion and comedy in a way that was satisfying as entertainment, even if it was maddening as mystery fiction. But, and this is the part that has never quite gone away, the resolution has always felt incomplete to a significant portion of the show's audience. Not because Maggie shooting Burns is implausible within the logic of the show, but because the evidence that the episode laid out pointed in complicated directions, and the resolution explained the mechanics of the shooting without fully explaining everything the episode seemed to promise it would explain. Here is what we know, within the show's own accounting. Burns had made an enormous number of enemies in the first part of the episode. He had, in the course of his latest scheme, which involved drilling for oil beneath the elementary school, managed to personally offend virtually every significant character in Springfield. He had ruined the retirement of Grandpa Simpson by stealing money from a fund. He had destroyed the career of Principal Skinner. He had enraged Homer by repeatedly failing to remember his name. He had committed multiple acts of civic and personal damage in the span of a single episode, creating a situation in which, as the detective character noted, everyone in Springfield had a motive. The gun that shot Burns, turned out to be traceable to Homer. It was Homer's gun. It ended up in Maggie's possession through a chain of custody that the show depicted, but that has always seemed a little convenient, a little rushed, a little like a solution chosen to resolve the mystery quickly rather than one that emerged inevitably from the clues. The fan theories about who really shot Burns, meaning who was the intended shooter, or who the writers originally planned before settling on Maggie, have been a permanent feature of the show's fan community. Smithers was the original suspect, in the logic of the episode, because he had snapped at Burns earlier and because a gun was found near him. The episode deliberately misdirected toward Smithers before revealing Maggie. Some fans believe Smithers actually did it, and that Maggie's involvement was a convenient explanation that protected Burns's loyal assistant. Others believe the answer was always Maggie, but that the significance of the answer is larger than the comedy of it. If Maggie shot Burns, even accidentally, even in the context of a struggle over a lollipop, Maggie shot one of the most powerful men in Springfield before she was old enough to walk. The most silent member of the family. The one everyone underestimates. The one who is always watching. This is the thing about Maggie that the show has built up over decades of small moments. She is not passive. She is not simply a baby. She is capable of action in ways that the other characters are not, precisely because she is underestimated, precisely because no one thinks to worry about what she might do. The shooting of Mr. Burns was not the last time Maggie would act when everyone expected her to sit still. It was the first time the show confirmed it. The mystery of who shot Mr. Burns is solved, officially. The show told us it was Maggie, but the mystery of what that means, what it says about the baby, about the family, about Springfield's relationship to power and violence, and the things we do when no one is watching, that mystery remains open. And that is perhaps the most satisfying kind of mystery. The kind that resolves on one level while opening on another. The kind that closes a door and opens a window. The kind that you can sit with for 30 years, the way Springfield has sat with it, and still find something new to look at. Let your eyes be soft. Let the mystery be something warm rather than something to solve. There are things that don't resolve cleanly, and sometimes that is not a failure. Sometimes it is the shape of the story. Burns is alive. Miraculously, as with everything else in his life, he survived being shot by an infant. He's back in his office. He's watching Springfield from his window, and somewhere below him, in a house on Evergreen Terrace, a baby is watching back. Section 6. The Immortal What Mr. Burns actually is. We have talked about Burns as a villain, as an employer, as a man shaped by a devastating childhood into something that is not quite capable of ordinary human warmth. But there is another dimension of Burns that deserves its own careful attention, and that is the question of what he actually is, not who, what. Burns has shown every sign, over 30-plus years of television, of being something more than a very old man. The medical episode, the one in which a doctor attempts to examine him and discovers that he has every disease simultaneously, is usually read as a joke, an exaggeration. The kind of thing the show does to make a point through absurdity. But the specific detail of that episode is worth holding for a moment. Burns has so many diseases that they compete with each other and cancel each other out. His body is a battleground so crowded that no single illness can take hold. He is not healthy. He is the opposite of healthy, but he is also somehow alive and functional, which suggests that survival is sometimes achieved not through health, but through a kind of chaos that nothing can organize. In the history of folklore and mythology, there are figures like this. Figures who cannot die because they are too corrupted for death to want them, or because they have struck deals that preclude the ordinary endings, or because they have accumulated enough of something power, malice, will that the normal processes don't apply. Burns is not a folklore figure in the literal sense. He is a cartoon character. But the show has drawn on folklore, logic in building him, and the result is someone who feels, in the gut, if not the brain, like something older and stranger than a television character. His name alone deserves attention. Charles Montgomery Burns. The name Burns carries connotations of fire, of damage, of something that leaves a mark. The name Montgomery is aristocratic, old money, a name with weight behind it. The name Charles is among the most common of English names, which gives him an ordinariness his surname immediately undercuts. He is, nominally, ordinary, but the rest of him insists on something else. His voice, as realized in the performance of the actor who has played him since the beginning, is a masterpiece of controlled decay. It is thin and precise, and occasionally wheezes with something that sounds like effort, as if speaking itself requires a small expenditure of energy that Burns measures carefully. He speaks slowly because he can. Time does not press on him the way it presses on everyone else. He is not in a hurry. He has never been in a hurry. He has lived long enough that urgency feels, to him, like a young person's problem. There are episodes that suggest Burns may have sold something, may have made some arrangement, formal or informal, with something that the show depicts obliquely, and the audience is left to interpret in exchange for his longevity. One episode, famously, has Burns being descended upon by a group of figures who might be angels, or might be aliens, or might be something else entirely, a sequence so strange and so tonally different from the rest of the show that it has never been adequately explained. Burns calls them off. He commands them. They leave. He commanded beings that might be angels, and they left because he told them to. That is a very specific kind of power. Not economic power, not the power of wealth or position, but something older. Something that predates the plant and the money and the long accumulation of Springfield real estate. Something that Burns had, perhaps, before any of the other things. The show has a recurring motif of Burns saying things about very old events with the casual familiarity of personal memory, the Roosevelts. Both of them. The wars, the economic collapses, the cultural shifts of a century. He does not say, "I've read about these things." He says, "I remember these things." He was there. He saw them. What was he doing for all that time? What was Burns in 1925, in 1942, in 1961? The show has glimpsed pieces of it, a young Burns in the army, a Burns at various early stages of his empire, but the full story of how one person accumulates that much history, that much context, that much damage is never told in one place. It is distributed across 30 years of episodes, and when you assemble it, you get something that feels less like a biography and more like a legend. Burns is Springfield's oldest story. He was there before the plant, probably. He will be there after the plant, somehow. He is the thing that endures, the thing that cannot be voted out or bought out or replaced, the thing at the bottom of the town's history that everything else rests on. There is something almost comforting about that, in a strange way, to know that the bottom of the stack is stable, even if what's stable is a monster. Burns will not leave. He will not retire. He will not suddenly become good. He will be there in the morning, in his office, watching, calculating, surviving. The town can be certain of this, if nothing else. Let your breathing be regular. Let the image of Burns in his tower be something you can release into the darkness without worry. He is there. He is always there. And you are here, somewhere far from Springfield, in your bed or on your couch, in the quiet of your particular night. The town goes on without you needing to do anything about it. It always has. It always will. Section 7. Maggie Simpson. The smartest person in the room. When you think about it carefully, when you really sit with it, the case for Maggie Simpson as the most significant character in the show becomes hard to argue against. She is the one who shot Mr. Burns. She is the one who, in multiple episodes, has been depicted as extraordinarily gifted, capable of complex reasoning, of reading advanced texts, of solving problems that baffle the adults around her, while maintaining her characteristic silence. She is the one who, in the rare moments when the show lets her act independently of the family dynamics, reveals herself as someone of enormous capability that the world is not yet equipped to understand or accommodate. Her silence is the key to her. Let's think about what silence means in Springfield. In Springfield, most characters talk constantly. Homer expresses every thought, however incomplete or counterproductive, as soon as it arrives. Bart narrates his own mischief to anyone who will listen. Marge voices her worries and her hopes and her disappointments in a stream of quiet, persistent communication. Lisa articulates everything, her feelings, her theories, her political commitments, her grief with the precision of someone who has decided that clarity is the only protection against being misunderstood. Even the show's minor characters, the people who appear for a scene and then disappear back into the background of the town, have voices. They contribute to the noise. And Maggie watches all of it from somewhere below eye level, taking it in with the wide-eyed attention of someone who is absorbing everything and giving nothing back. She is the only character in the show who cannot be read. Everyone else, you can see what they're thinking because they say it, or their face betrays it, or their actions make it obvious. Maggie is opaque. She is the one member of the Simpson family whose inner life is genuinely hidden from us and from everyone around her, because she has never chosen to reveal it through language. This makes her, paradoxically, the most interesting and the most powerful. In a world where everyone talks, the one who doesn't has all the information. There are moments scattered through the show's history, small, blink-and-miss-them moments that suggest the nature of what Maggie has been doing with all of that accumulated observation. She can read. This has been confirmed in multiple episodes, at ages when children are not supposed to be able to read. She understands complex situations. She has predicted outcomes that the adults around her missed. She has taken action, decisive, precise action, whether firing a gun or protecting her family from danger, or navigating situations that should be beyond her developmental level without hesitation. The fan theory that Maggie is a genius, that she is operating at a cognitive level far beyond what anyone suspects, is supported by enough specific episode evidence that it is less a theory than an observation. The show has been telling us, in its small moments, that the baby is extraordinary. We just haven't always been paying close enough attention. There is also the question of what Maggie will become. The show has depicted the future in various episodes, and Maggie's futures are consistently remarkable. She grows up, she becomes capable of things that would surprise anyone who knew her only as the baby with the pacifier. She has been depicted as a musician, as a fighter, as a leader, as someone who steps into power with the ease of someone who has been preparing for it their whole life by watching and waiting and learning. That preparation, the watching and the waiting and the learning, is what Springfield has given her. Springfield, with all its strangeness and its darkness and its nuclear contamination and its impossible recurring situations, has been Maggie's education. She has had the best possible teachers in the worst possible school. She has learned resourcefulness from Homer, resilience from Marge, courage from Bart, and clarity from Lisa. And she has learned, from Springfield itself, what to do when the world around you is more complicated and more dangerous than it pretends to be. She learned to wait. She learned to watch. She learned to act when the moment was exactly right, and not before. She shot Mr. Burns when the moment was exactly right. Think about that. An infant, in a moment of struggle, achieved what the entire town of Springfield had been unable to achieve for decades. She reached the most powerful and most protected man in the city, and she laid him low. She did it without planning, or with the particular planning of someone whose entire existence has been a plan that no one recognized as one. The sleeping baby is the most dangerous character in the show. Let that idea be comfortable rather than alarming. There is something deeply right about it, about the idea that potential is most fully itself when it is still forming, when it has not yet declared itself, when the world has not yet had the chance to shape it into something smaller than what it could be. Maggie is still becoming. She is always still becoming. Let yourself be a little like that right now. Not fully formed in this moment. Just resting, accumulating, preparing in the quiet way that quiet things prepare. The night is with you. Let it be with you. Section 8. The floating timeline: why nobody ages and what it means. Here is one of the deepest structural strangeness of Springfield. And it is a strangeness that the show acknowledges in oblique ways, jokes about occasionally, and otherwise simply maintains without explanation. Nobody ages. Bart Simpson has been 11 years old for over 30 years of broadcast television. Lisa has been 8. Maggie has been an infant. Homer and Marge are in their late 30s and have been in their late 30s since 1989. The events of the show pile up weddings and divorces and deaths and disasters and achievements and humiliations and moments of profound change, and then the next episode begins and none of it has happened. Not in any way that shows on the characters. Not in any way that the characters carry forward. Springfield operates on what scholars of television call a floating timeline, a temporal structure in which the present is always now, the past is always recent, and the characters exist at fixed ages relative to each other without those ages ever advancing. This is a practical necessity for long-running serialized entertainment. You cannot age Bart Simpson into a teenager without fundamentally changing the show. You cannot let Homer develop in ways that would require the story to close chapters. The show needs to be renewable. The characters need to be permanent. But the floating timeline produces something philosophically strange when you think about it from inside the world it describes. The characters of Springfield are, on some level, aware of their own strangeness. The show has made explicit jokes about it. Characters have referenced events from early seasons as happening a few years ago when, in real time, those events happened 2 decades ago. The show's internal chronology is deliberately vague on this point in the world of Springfield. Time passes, but it passes differently. A season of the show might correspond to a few months in Springfield's internal time, or a few years, or something that doesn't map onto human time at all. The most haunting implication of the floating timeline is that the characters are, in some sense, trapped, not consciously. They do not experience their situation as imprisonment. But they are caught in a loop, a very long, very comfortable loop, with recurring situations and permanent relationships, and the particular sadness of a world where nothing truly changes because true change would require the story to end. Bart Simpson is 11 years old. He will never be 12. He is perpetually on the edge of adolescence, perpetually in the moment just before the transformation that everyone in his situation knows is coming, perpetually in the anxiety and the freedom and the particular wildness of a child who is almost but not quite something else. He can see the threshold. He cannot cross it. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old. She is perpetually the gifted child in the wrong environment, perpetually the one who sees too clearly for her own comfort, perpetually the person who knows that the place she is in is not the place she should be, and who cannot leave it because she is 8, and you cannot leave when you are 8. She is perpetually waiting. She has been waiting for 30 years. There is a reading of the floating timeline that is tender rather than sad. In this reading, Springfield is a gift, a place where people get to stay. Homer gets to keep his children young. Marge gets to keep her family whole. The town gets to exist in the fullness of a particular American moment, the late 20th century suburb, without being ground down by the attrition of time. Real places lose their shape over decades. Real families fracture and disperse and change in ways that are sometimes beautiful and sometimes devastating. Springfield doesn't. Springfield stays. There is love in that, even if there is also tragedy. The characters of Springfield have been given a peculiar eternity, not the eternity of the dead, not the stillness of something that has stopped, but the eternity of a loop, a long, warm loop full of familiar things, playing on repeat in the amber of a time that will not advance. The same streets, the same voices, the same faces, a little yellow, a little worn in their particular ways, always returning to the place they started. This is what makes Springfield feel like home, even to people who have never lived there. Because home, for most people, is also a kind of time, a specific period that you carry with you, the place where you existed before you became the person you are now, the version of the world that feels most completely itself. Springfield is the home of a specific American moment, and it will always be that home, and you can always go back to it because it never left. That is the final, most unexpected comfort of the floating timeline. It is a preservation. It is Springfield saying, "We will not change. You can come back. We will be here exactly as you remember us, whenever you need to return." The Simpsons are home on Evergreen Terrace. The light is on in the living room. It is always on. Section 9. The Simpsons' predictions when Springfield saw the future. There is a list. You may have seen versions of it. The Simpsons predictions moments in the show when a joke or a storyline or an offhand plot element seem to anticipate something that would later happen in the real world. The list has grown over the decades, and it has attracted the kind of attention that the internet gives to patterns it finds fascinating. And there are now people who seem to believe, with varying degrees of seriousness, that the show has some supernatural predictive ability. Let me tell you what I think is actually happening, and then let me tell you why the truth is stranger and more interesting than the supernatural explanation. The show has been running since 1989. That is over 30 years of weekly episodes, each of which contains dozens of jokes, references, satirical observations, background details, plot elements, and cultural predictions. The sheer volume of the show's output is enormous. 30 years of episodes times 22 episodes a season, times the number of jokes and details per episode, produces a number of specific observations about the world that is in the tens of thousands. When you make tens of thousands of specific observations about the world over 30 years, some of them will be right. Some of them will anticipate things that happen later. This is not prophecy. This is probability. If you flip a coin enough times, you will eventually flip heads 100 times in a row, and it will feel like magic even though it is statistics. But the more interesting question is not whether the show is actually predictive. It is why the show is so often approximately right. Why does it get things correct at a rate that feels higher than random chance? The answer is that the show has always had extraordinarily good writers. Writers who were paying close attention to the direction that technology, culture, and politics were moving, and who were extrapolating those trajectories into the future as part of the job of satire. Satire requires you to see where things are going before they get there. A satirist who is only observing the present is already behind. The best satirists are reading the momentum of things. the implicit logic of trends, the direction that the world is leaning, and they are telling you where that lean leads. The show's writers were doing this constantly, across decades, and some of their extrapolations turned out to be accurate. This is not magic. This is craft. But the result when you look at the list of predictions is something that feels uncanny, because the craft is invisible, and only the accuracy is visible. Let me give you some specific examples to make this concrete. The show predicted, in 1998, a device very similar to the modern smartwatch, a wristwatch with a video calling function that was, at the time, an absurdist joke about futuristic technology. Smartwatches with video calling are now a consumer product. The prediction was not magic. The trajectory of miniaturizing technology and increasing the functionality of wearable devices was already visible in 1998 to anyone paying attention. The writers extrapolated it to a logical endpoint. The show featured, in various episodes, the concept of a Trump presidency as a joke about the absurdity of celebrity culture and the American political system's relationship to spectacle. When Donald Trump was elected in 2016, the episode in question became instantly viral, and the show was credited with prediction. But the episode was not predicting a specific person's electoral success. It was satirizing a dynamic, the logic by which celebrity and money and the media's appetite for spectacle might produce a certain kind of political outcome, and that dynamic did produce the outcome it pointed toward. Eventually, the predictions are real, in the sense that the show was right about things. They are not supernatural in the sense that the show had access to information the rest of us didn't. What the show had was attention, careful, consistent, deeply skilled attention to the world and to the directions it was heading. It is the same attention that produces all good satire. It is the same attention that makes Springfield feel, even 30 years later, like a place that is still accurately describing something about American life. This is perhaps the most genuinely unsettling thing about Springfield, if you think about it from a certain angle. The show has been a mirror held up to America for 3 decades, and what it has consistently shown in that mirror is something that looks like reality, distorted just enough to be funny, distorted just enough that we can watch it without having to claim it fully as ourselves. And then reality catches up to the distortion, and the mirror and the thing it's reflecting become briefly, dizzyingly indistinguishable. Springfield is not predicting the future. Springfield is describing the present, and the present keeps arriving to meet it. Section 10. Where is Springfield? The geography of an impossible town. Let me tell you something that sounds like it should have a simple answer, but doesn't. Springfield does not have a state. It exists in America. Every episode confirms this. The iconography is American, the culture is American, the political structure is American, the landscapes and the architecture and the way people talk about their town in relation to a larger country is all unmistakably American. Springfield is American the way sunrise is American. It does not question it. It simply is. But the specific state in which Springfield exists has been deliberately, carefully, gleefully withheld for the entire run of the show. Every time the show has seemed to establish a geographic location, it has immediately subverted that establishment with a contradicting detail. There have been mountains near Springfield and coastlines near Springfield and deserts near Springfield and forests near Springfield. Springfield has had neighbors called Shelbyville and Capital City and Ogdenville, but these places do not appear on any real map because they are as fictional as Springfield itself. The show's creator has confirmed that this was intentional. Springfield was named after the Simpsons family from the TV show Father Knows Best, which was set in Springfield, and was chosen partly because Springfield is the most common city name in the United States. There is a Springfield in almost every state. The generic name was a way of suggesting that Springfield could be anywhere, that it was every American town simultaneously, that the Simpsons were your neighbors regardless of where you lived. This is brilliant as a narrative strategy and interesting as a philosophical one. By refusing to place Springfield specifically, the show refuses to let its audience off the hook. You cannot say, "Ah, yes, those people in that state not like us." You cannot use geography to create comfortable distance between yourself and what the show is depicting. Springfield is not Ohio, not Illinois, not Oregon, not Florida, not any of the states it has variously resembled or referenced. Springfield is the state of being American. It is the geography of a particular kind of national experience. But the show's relationship to its own geography has also produced some fascinating specific contradictions that, if you assemble them, create a picture of a town that seems to exist outside of normal space. Springfield has had a mountain range accessible by a short drive. It has had a coastline close enough to reach in an afternoon. It has had desert. It has had Arctic-adjacent weather systems severe enough to simulate genuine polar conditions. It has had tropical ecosystems within its broader region. In any single American state, this would be impossible. The topographic variety that Springfield demonstrates over 30 seasons of episodes is not possible within the area that a single mid-size American city would actually occupy. The most literal interpretation of this is simply continuity error. The show's geography changes because the writers don't track it carefully, because different episodes are written by different teams, because consistency was not prioritized against the needs of individual episode plots. This is almost certainly the practical explanation, but the poetic interpretation is more interesting. Springfield's geography is elastic because Springfield is not a real place. It is a space, a narrative space, a container for stories, and it can expand or contract to accommodate whatever the story needs. It needs a mountain this week. There is a mountain. It needs a coast. There is a coast. The town is not limited by the physics of actual geography because it has never been subject to actual geography. It exists in a dimension where the landscape is responsive to narrative. This is, in miniature, what fiction does generally. The settings of stories are not real places. They are descriptions of places, and those descriptions can shift to serve the story. What makes Springfield unusual is that it has sustained this fictional geography over such a long period and with such a specific visual consistency that it creates the illusion of a real place, a place you feel you could navigate, a place you believe in while simultaneously being a place that cannot physically be real. It is everywhere. It is the American town. It is the place where you grew up, wherever you grew up, because it has absorbed enough American detail to feel like everywhere while being specifically nowhere. There is something peaceful in that. The place that is everywhere has no address to defend, no boundaries to maintain, no need to be one thing rather than another. It can be whatever the story needs it to be, and it can hold whatever the story needs to hold. Springfield can expand to contain anything, including you, tonight, wherever you are in the world. You are in Springfield right now, in the particular sense that Springfield is wherever someone is listening to its story. The town has no fixed location. It finds its location in the telling. That is a kind of magic that is better than anything supernatural. It is the magic of a story that travels. Section 11. The principal who wasn't the Armin Tamzarian story. If there is one episode in the show's long history that crystallizes the central darkness of Springfield better than any other, it might be a Season 9 episode that many fans regard as one of the strangest things the show ever did. Principal Seymour Skinner, the man who has run Springfield Elementary since the very beginning of the show, who has been a fixed presence in the town's institutional life, who has a complicated relationship with his mother and a hopeless love life and a Vietnam-era backstory, is not Seymour Skinner. His name is Armin Tamzarian. He is a man who, as a young person, failed to deliver the news of Seymour Skinner's apparent death in Vietnam, and, finding himself in Springfield with no better plan, simply took Skinner's identity and kept it. He became the principal. He lived Skinner's life. He became, to Springfield, so completely Seymour Skinner that when the real Seymour Skinner eventually returned, alive, the town found his presence uncomfortable and disruptive, and voted to send him away and restore the fake. They voted to keep the lie. They voted explicitly to maintain the fiction over the reality, because the fiction had been there for so long that it had become, for Springfield, the only reality that mattered. The episode is played partly for comedy and is widely considered one of the weaker entries in the show's history by a portion of its fan base, partly because the Skinner twist retroactively complicates years of storytelling in ways the show does not seem prepared to deal with. But the episode's premise, the idea that Springfield would, given the choice between a comfortable falsehood and an uncomfortable truth, choose the falsehood, is not a weakness of the show's logic. It is an expression of the show's deepest argument about the place. Springfield chooses comfort. Springfield chooses the familiar story over the accurate one. Springfield has an enormous capacity for institutional denial, for collective forgetting, for the kind of social consensus that preserves the feeling of normalcy at the cost of everything beneath it. The Skinner story is extreme, but it rhymes with a pattern you can see throughout the show's history. Burns's environmental damage is absorbed and forgotten. Homer's nuclear near misses are absorbed and forgotten. Civic crises are resolved and absorbed and forgotten. Springfield has a municipal memory that seems specifically calibrated to forget what would be most uncomfortable to remember. This is, again, not a fictional behavior. Communities do this. The collective capacity to forget, or, more precisely, the collective choice to not discuss, is one of the most powerful forces in social life. It is how towns maintain themselves through things that should, by rights, make continuation impossible. It is how families stay together through betrayals and disasters. It is how institutions persist past the point where their original purpose has been compromised. Springfield is a study in the costs and benefits of communal forgetting. The benefit is coherence. The town stays together, the stories continue, the familiar faces remain. The cost is truth. The cost is the buried thing that no one talks about, accumulating beneath the surface, occasionally pushing up into view in ways that are comic or horrifying or both. Armin Tamzarian is still living as Seymour Skinner. He will always be Seymour Skinner now, Springfield decided. The decision is permanent. And the real Seymour Skinner is out there somewhere, displaced by his own story, living under a name that should be his in a town that has given that name to someone else. That is genuinely strange. That is the kind of strange that is also a little sad, in the way that things that are too far gone to fix are sad. Not tragic, exactly. Just the particular melancholy of a situation that resolved in the wrong direction and then calcified. The town sleeps easily with this knowledge. The town has always slept easily. That is perhaps the most unsettling thing about it. Section 12. Ned Flanders. The darkness beneath the niceness. Ned Flanders lives next door. He is Homer's neighbor. He is the man who greets you with, "Hi diddly ho, neighborino," who volunteers for everything, who has never, in 30 years of being a character, lost his fundamental cheerfulness for more than the span of a single episode. He is also, the more you look at him, one of the saddest figures in the show. Ned Flanders is a man who lost his wife. He had a wife, Maud, who was killed in one of the show's most shocking moments during a freak accident involving t-shirt cannons at a NASCAR event. The death was handled with unusual weight for the show. Ned was genuinely devastated. The episodes that followed dealt with grief in a way that the show's tone doesn't always accommodate, and they revealed something about Ned that the comedy version of his character doesn't often show. He was genuinely lost without Maud. He found his way back. He found another partner, eventually. He continued his extraordinarily dedicated Christian practice, his volunteering, his neighborly cheerfulness, his patient endurance of Homer's constant selfishness, and the way Homer treats his friendship with the particular carelessness of someone who knows the friendship will survive, because Ned will not let it end. But there is something under the cheerfulness that the show has excavated in specific episodes. Ned, it turns out, had a genuinely difficult childhood raised by parents who subscribed to a psychology trend that believed children should never be disciplined, never told no, never corrected, and the result was that Ned accumulated decades of repressed anger and frustration that eventually, in one memorable episode, exploded. The cheerfulness is not natural. The cheerfulness is maintained at cost. It is the output of a system under significant pressure. And the pressure, when it exceeds the system's capacity, produces Ned behaving in ways that shock everyone around him, who has only ever seen the cheerful surface. This is actually one of the most sophisticated pieces of characterization in the show. The idea that relentless niceness is itself a symptom that someone who is always positive, always patient, always giving, may be a person who has been told, either explicitly or by their own internal rules, that any other emotional expression is not permitted is a psychologically real observation dressed in the clothes of a cartoon. Ned is a man who cannot be angry, and so he is always angry at a level below the surface, where the anger has nowhere to go except deeper. He prays instead of expressing frustration. He volunteers instead of resting. He gives instead of receiving. And it works, mostly. The pressure is mostly manageable. The cheerfulness is mostly genuine. in the way that a habit you practice long enough becomes something that resembles the original. He is also, notably, the most conventionally successful person in Springfield in many ways. He has a hardware store. He is a good father. He maintains his house. He is present for his community. He is the version of a certain American archetype, the faithful man, the good neighbor, the upstanding citizen that the show treats with more complexity than satire usually affords. Homer and Ned's relationship is the spine of the show in a way that doesn't always get acknowledged. They are opposites, and they are friends. Homer takes and Ned gives. Homer ignores and Ned observes. Homer destroys and Ned repairs. The friendship should not work, by any ordinary logic, and it works because Ned will not let it not work, and Homer, whatever his failures, would be genuinely diminished without Ned's steady, infuriating, life-affirming presence next door. There is a version of the show's argument that says Ned is the person Homer would be if Homer had unlimited patience and no appetites. And there is another version that says Homer is the person Ned would be if Ned could admit to his desires. They are each other's shadow. They are each other's unlived life. In Springfield, you always live next to your unlived life. That's what makes it such an interesting town. Section 13. Hans Moleman and the Quiet Horrors at the Edges. There is a man in Springfield who seems to exist specifically to suffer. His name is Hans Moleman, and he is small and old and speaks in a thin, papery voice, and he appears in episodes with a frequency that belies his apparent insignificance, and in every appearance, something terrible happens to him. He has been run over by cars. He has been attacked by animals. He has been crushed by falling objects. He has been the victim of medical malpractice, civic negligence, and the particular indifference of a universe that seems to have targeted him for experience. He has died, on screen, multiple times, in ways that the show handles as comedy and then immediately ignores by returning him to life in the next episode, because the show needs him alive to suffer again. Hans Moleman is, in the show's mythology, a kind of cosmic joke made flesh. He is the unlucky person, the one for whom nothing goes right, the one who exists at the intersection of all the ways that a town like Springfield can quietly, persistently fail its most vulnerable residents. He is elderly, he is alone. He has no apparent family, no apparent economic resources, no apparent social connections that protect him from the thing that keeps happening to him. He is the margin of Springfield, the person who falls through all the nets, who nobody quite notices, who accumulates damage without accumulating advocates. He is, if you allow yourself to feel it, genuinely sad. Not in the way that the show's tragic moments are sad, not in the way that Marge's suppressed ambitions are sad, or Bart's fear of vulnerability is sad, but in the quieter, stranger way that comedy horror is sad. The joke is that terrible things happen to him. The sadder thing underneath the joke is that terrible things happen to people like him, in real towns, and the comedy is a way of holding that knowledge at a distance that makes it bearable to look at. Springfield has a lot of characters like this. Characters who exist at the edges of the main family's story, who illuminate something about the town that the main story can only gesture toward. The lovable drunk, the lonely octogenarian, the perpetually overlooked and perpetually suffering ordinary person who is not the protagonist of any story the town tells about itself but who is, in the accumulation of small moments, one of the most honest portraits the show has produced. Pay attention to the edges, in Springfield and everywhere. The story usually lives there. Section 14. The loop closes what Springfield actually means. We have been traveling through Springfield for a long time now. Let your body acknowledge that the particular heaviness of having been somewhere for a while, the way attention, even relaxed attention, has weight to it. Let yourself be heavy. Let the night hold you the way it does when you've been awake long enough that the boundary between waking and sleeping has gone soft. We started in the town square. We went to the plant, to the yellow houses, to the hospital where Homer may or may not have been dreaming for 30 years. We went to Burns's tower and to Maggie's crib and to the floating timeline where nobody ages and the story never ends. We went to the Skinner who isn't Skinner, to the Ned who smiles through gritted teeth, to the Hans Moleman who suffers at the margin of things. Now, let's pull back. Let's go high enough to see the whole thing. Springfield is, at its most fundamental, a story about love in an imperfect place. Not love as a solution, not love as something that fixes things or makes them right or overcomes the darkness. Springfield has too much history with darkness for that kind of love to be the point. The tire fire keeps burning, the plant keeps contaminating, Burns keeps watching. The town keeps forgetting what it would be most useful to remember. But the love is there. It is obstinate and imperfect. And sometimes it looks like Homer falling asleep at a piano recital and then suddenly being awake and applauding with the particular fervor of someone who realizes they almost missed something important. It looks like Marge in her blue tower of hair, patiently holding the family together with the particular tenacity of someone who has decided, without drama, that this is the thing she will do. It looks like Bart, at the edges of his bad behavior, turning back to check that his family is okay. It looks like Lisa, who sees everything clearly and stays anyway, because clarity without love is just loneliness. It looks like Maggie, watching all of them with enormous eyes, absorbing everything, waiting for the moment when she will need to act and act decisively, and loving them all in the total, pre-verbal way of someone who has not yet learned to put conditions on it. Springfield is terrifying. We have established this. The nuclear contamination, the immortal billionaire, the town that votes to keep its comfortable lies, the floating timeline in which nothing changes and no one escapes the age they've always been. The horror of Springfield is real. But the horror is not the point. The point is the love that persists inside the horror. The light in the window on Evergreen Terrace. The family at the kitchen table. The town that keeps going because the people in it keep showing up for each other, imperfectly, constantly, in all the ways that real love shows up, which is to say, in ordinary moments that don't look like much from the outside but are everything from the inside. You know this kind of love. You have it somewhere in your life, or you are looking for it, or you remember it from a time that feels far away. It is the love of being known by someone, the love of belonging to a place and a set of people in a way that does not require you to be perfect or to have it figured out. It is the love of the house with the light on, the love of the voice that knows your name. Springfield will always have this. Under all the strangeness, under the theories and the dark readings and the questions about what Burns actually is and why nobody ages, under all of it there is a family that loves each other in the messy, chaotic, real way that families actually love each other. That is what the show has always been about. That is the loop it keeps closing. Episode after episode, season after season, 30 years deep, and still returning to the same house at the end of every story. The house is yellow, the lights are on, the family is home, Homer is in his chair, Marge is in the kitchen, or reading, or doing the 1,000 things that Marge does that hold the household in orbit. Bart is somewhere in the neighborhood, probably causing something, probably about to be in trouble. Lisa is in her room with the saxophone, working through a feeling too complicated for words. And Maggie is in her crib, or in Marge's arms, or watching everything from behind those enormous eyes. The town is asleep around them. The plant is humming. The river is carrying its glow. The stars over Springfield are whatever stars are available in the particular state that Springfield refuses to commit to, and they are bright enough, and they are there. Springfield will be here in the morning. It always is. And so will you, wherever you are, whatever you woke up to, or what you are falling asleep from. The night is doing its work. The story is done. Let yourself go all the way down now, all the way into the warmth and the quiet, into the place where the details soften and the shapes remain, into the particular sleep that comes when you've been somewhere interesting and you're ready to rest. The town is behind you. The light is on. Everything for tonight is okay. End of script. Total script. Fall asleep to the entire story of Springfield and why it's terrifying. Expanded Section 1. The town that time forgot deeper. Let me take you back to the beginning one more time, but slower. Let the images form at the pace of something half-remembered, something you find yourself thinking about in the quiet before sleep. The opening credits of the show, which have played hundreds of times across 35 years, contain their own small library of storytelling compressed into 45 seconds of animation. You know them without having to try. The establishing shot sweeping over a town of yellow people, going about their yellow lives while a piece of music plays that was designed specifically to feel both triumphant and slightly absurd, a fanfare for something that deserves a fanfare even if it can't quite articulate why. There is Bart at his school desk, carving something into the wood with the butt of his pencil while the teacher's back is turned. There is Lisa being ushered out of band practice for playing too aggressively, too personally, too much herself, for the school's institutional tolerance. There is Marge at the checkout line with Maggie, and the checkout machine scans Maggie accidentally when she places her on the conveyor belt, and the price that comes up is the original price of a baby in 1989, which was $847.63, and this detail delights people even though they could not tell you why. And there is Homer, leaving work at the plant with a glowing radioactive rod sticking out of his collar, dropping it in the gutter as he gets into the car, driving home the rod sitting in the gutter of a Springfield street, leaking whatever it leaks into whatever is beneath it. That rod in the gutter, every time. Right there in the opening sequence. The show has been telling you the whole time. Homer gets home and the family converges on the couch from different directions, and they sit and the television comes on, and the joke is about the television watching itself, about the loop of entertainment consuming entertainment, about the American family gathered around the screen that gathers them. It is a joke and a love letter, and a very gentle criticism, delivered with enough warmth that you never feel targeted by it. The Simpsons, whatever else they are a family watching television together, and there is something in you that responds to that image with recognition so deep it bypasses analysis. This is the genius of the show's premise. It gave you the familiar, the couch, the television, the family, the routine, and then it quietly started adding elements that were not familiar, that were strange or dark or structurally unsound, until the familiar setting contained something much more interesting than familiarity. The house looks like every house. The street looks like every street. And behind that facade, if you look carefully enough, the details accumulate into a portrait of a place that is very specifically, very deliberately, something more than ordinary. The neighborhood of Springfield has been described in enough episodes that you can build a mental map of it. The Simpson house on Evergreen Terrace, a two-story structure with a garage and a yard that is sometimes enormous and sometimes improbably small, depending on the needs of any given plot. The Flanders house next door, meticulous where the Simpsons is slovenly, maintained where the Simpsons accumulates entropy. The street that curves toward town, where Moe's Tavern sits at the center of a social gravity that pulls a certain kind of Springfield resident inward on Friday evenings. The school a few blocks away, its exterior unchanged from the first episode to the most recent, its interior a reliable source of institutional despair. And further out, always visible from various elevations in town, the plant. The plant as landmark. The plant as compass point. If you're in Springfield and you're not sure where you are, look for the Twin Towers, look for the steam. You can always orient yourself by the plant because the plant is at the edge of everything, which means it is also the border of everything, which means it is the thing that Springfield is always oriented toward even when it is not looking. There is a recurring visual motif in the show where characters look toward the plant involuntarily. Someone will be in the middle of something else, a conversation, a meal, a moment of personal crisis, and their eyes will drift to the horizon where the towers are visible, and then drift back, and the moment is never commented on. It is too small to comment on. It is just the thing their eyes do. Looking at the plant the way you look at an old injury when the weather changes, the body remembering something the mind has learned to forget. Springfield's downtown, such as it is, contains a number of institutions that have become as familiar to regular viewers as their own hometowns. Moe's Tavern is the most important of these, a bar that exists in the tradition of the great American social bar, a Cheers for people who have given up on being the people who go to Cheers. It is dark inside and it smells, presumably, the way it looks, and the drinks are not good, and the owner is complicated in his hospitality, and it is home to a collection of regulars whose life situations range from mildly unfortunate to quietly devastating. Homer spends more time here than the show has ever fully accounted for, given his family commitments and his professional obligations. Homer needs Moe's the way some people need a particular chair, not for what it gives them, but for what it lets them put down. The school, Springfield Elementary, is a depiction of public education under resource constraint that is both satirical and, in uncomfortable ways, accurate. The building is decaying in the low-level, aesthetically dispiriting way that underfunded public infrastructure decays. The teachers are a mix of the deeply committed and the deeply exhausted, the principled and the merely surviving. The students are children being processed through a system that sometimes sees them clearly and more often processes them according to metrics that have nothing to do with who they actually are. Bart is a behavioral problem. Lisa is an asset. The other children are sorted into appropriate categories, and the sorting proceeds. Springfield's civic infrastructure, its town hall, its police department, its courts, its public works is depicted with a satirical affection that suggests the writers had deep familiarity with the specific ways that local government fails to serve the people it is supposed to serve, while nonetheless being the only system those people have. Mayor Quimby is corrupt in the particular way of someone who is not especially intelligent, but has mastered the mechanics of retaining power in a context where the voters are not paying close enough attention. Chief Wiggum is incompetent in the specific way that incompetence in institutional authority becomes a kind of ambient harm, not malicious, not targeted, just persistently, reliably insufficient. The court system produces outcomes. The Public Works Department provides services. None of it is particularly good, and all of it is what there is. This is Springfield as social portrait. This is the show doing what the best satire does, which is not exaggeration, or not only exaggeration but observation. The observation that most people's lives are shaped primarily by institutions that are imperfect in ways that no individual chose and no individual can easily fix. The observation that the town you live in is not a neutral backdrop for your life but an active participant in it, shaping what you can do and who you can be in ways you may not notice until you try to do or be something the town doesn't accommodate. Springfield notices this about itself sometimes. In the moments between jokes, in the pauses before the next disaster, in the particular quality of light over the town in the early evening, when the plant is visible and the families are walking home, and the whole complicated apparatus of the place is briefly, quietly still, Springfield seems to know what it is. It seems to carry its own history. It seems aware of the accumulated weight of everything it has done and not done, remembered and not remembered, been and failed to be. And then the moment passes, and the next episode begins, and the town wakes up fresh, as it always does, ready to do it all again. That freshness is one of Springfield's most remarkable qualities. Not innocence. Springfield is not innocent. It knows too much for innocence. But a particular kind of resilience that looks like renewal. A capacity to begin again that is either deeply optimistic or the symptom of something broken, depending on how you hold it. Tonight, let it be optimistic. Let the town's freshness be a permission for your own. The day is over. Whatever it contained, it is complete now. Tomorrow is not here yet. There is just this, the dark, the quiet, the story of a strange and beloved place, and you here, receiving it. Springfield is always beginning again. So are you. Expanded Section 2. The nuclear heart, every detail the plant tells us. The plant has 427 employees, according to one episode's accounting, though this number has varied over the years in the show's typical way of treating specific facts as fungible when the story needs them to be different. What doesn't vary is the plant's centrality. Whatever number of people work there, it is enough to make the plant one of Springfield's largest employers, which means that the plant's financial health is Springfield's financial health, and Burns's decisions about the plant are, in a very direct sense, decisions about the lives of a large fraction of Springfield's working population. This is the mechanism of the company town. A company town is a place where a single employer has become so dominant in the local economy that the normal market mechanisms that would provide workers with alternatives that would allow them to leave a bad job for a better one, to organize for better conditions, to resist exploitation are significantly weakened by the structural reality that there is nowhere else to go. The plant is where you work. If you lose the plant, you lose everything. And so the plant's workers, including Homer, including the many others whose lives we glimpse in passing through the show, have a relationship to their employer that is not quite the ordinary employment relationship. It is something more like dependency, something more like being owned, though no one uses that word. Burns understands this. Burns has always understood this. His management of the plant is not efficient by any standard measure of efficiency. The violations, the aging equipment, the safety record, the repeated near disasters, but it is effective at the one thing Burns cares about, which is maintaining his power. A plant that runs on fear and dependency and the particular psychology of people who cannot afford to leave is a plant that will run for a long time because the workers will tolerate almost anything rather than risk losing the only job the town has for them. Homer is the clearest example of this dynamic. Homer's employment at the plant has survived things that would have terminated any normal employment relationship multiple times over. He has caused accidents. He has been directly responsible for production failures. He has sleep at his station. He has eaten at his station. He has allowed his personal life to interfere with his professional responsibilities in ways that are not small or occasional, but chronic and structural. And he has not been fired, not permanently. He has been fired and rehired, let go and brought back, suspended and reinstated, in a cycle that the show treats as comedy, but that, within its own logic, is evidence of something. What keeps Homer employed is not his value to the plant's operations. His value to the plant's operations is, at best, neutral. What keeps him employed is the deal that was made, in one form or another, between the Burns organization and the Simpson family. The show has referenced this deal in different forms across different seasons: a deal involving Homer's grandfather, a deal involving Homer's mother's absence, a deal involving the particular value that a compliant, incompetent safety inspector provides to a plant that does not want effective safety inspection. However you account for it, the result is the same. Homer has a job he cannot lose, and Burns has an employee who serves his purposes. The plant's physical description, its specific systems, its reactor design, its cooling infrastructure is handled with the mixture of accuracy and absurdity that the show applies to everything technical. The writers did real research. The show's nuclear plant references real nuclear plant concepts, real safety concerns, real regulatory frameworks. The comedic exaggeration of these things lands because it is exaggeration rather than invention. The show took real problems with nuclear power and made them bigger, brighter, more obvious, so that the joke reads as recognition rather than fantasy. The three-eyed fish Blinky, as he was named, is the plant's most visible legacy in the natural world. Blinky appeared in an early episode, was used as a campaign prop by a candidate running against Burns, and was then eaten by Burns on television in what was meant to be a demonstration of the fish's harmlessness. The demonstration was not convincing. Burns's expression as he consumed the fish, in a famous image, was not the expression of someone who was enjoying their meal or making a confident point. It was the expression of someone doing something necessary at cost to themselves. Blinky was not the only evidence of the plant's effect on the local ecosystem. The river near the plant has been depicted with glowing water, with unusual fish of various descriptions, with banks where the soil seems to have taken on qualities that the soil of uncontaminated riverbanks does not generally have. The birds near the plant have been shown in states that suggest they are not entirely normal. The vegetation around the perimeter of the facility grows in ways that have occasionally been depicted as strange, too fast, too slow, in colors that are not quite right. The plant is terraforming the area around it. Slowly, quietly, persistently, it is making the landscape around it into something that resembles the landscape of a place that has been changed by what it contains. This is not presented as a central plot. It is background detail, background texture, the accumulation of small observations that together make an argument the show is not quite willing to make explicitly. The argument is, the plant is the most important fact about Springfield. Everything else is a response to the plant. The people, the culture, the biology, the politics, the institutional failures, the collective amnesia, all of it flows downstream from those two towers and the reactor at their center. Springfield is a nuclear town, not in the way that Oak Ridge or Los Alamos are nuclear towns, not through the direct employment of thousands of people in weapons research, but in the way that any town with a dominant industrial presence is an industrial town. The industry shapes the town. The town shapes its people to accommodate the industry. The people's accommodation of the industry reinforces the industry's power. Burns sits at the center of this loop. He is the plant, and the plant is Springfield, and Springfield is Burns, in a way that is circular and self-reinforcing and very hard to exit from the inside. But here, in the dark, you can see it from the outside. You can see the whole structure at once. And from this angle, the plant is not terrifying. It is just a thing, a large, humming, imperfectly managed thing that has been doing what it does for a very long time. The steam rises from the towers in the way it always has. The hum is low and constant, like the sound of something deeply asleep but not stopped. Not stopped yet. Let that hum be a sound that soothes rather than alarms. You are outside the town. You can see the glow over the horizon where Springfield is. It is the glow of a place that is alive, that is inhabited, that has people in it who are going about the business of their lives at this hour. Some are awake, some are not. All of them are under the same sky. The plant hums. The town breathes. The night continues. Expanded Section 3. The yellow skin a longer look. Let me tell you something about color. About what color does in the mind and why the yellow of Springfield is more than a brand choice, more than a visual convenience, more than the decision of an animator trying to fill screen space with something distinctive. Color carries meaning at a level below language. You don't think about it, you respond to it. The warmth of a yellow room, the coldness of a blue hallway, the authority of a dark suit, the openness of a white space. These responses are partly cultural, partly evolutionary, partly the accumulated weight of everything you have ever seen associated with a particular color. By the time you are an adult, you have built up such an intricate web of color associations that your response to any given hue is immediate, complex, and largely invisible to you. Yellow is the color of caution and the color of sunshine. It is the color of warning signs and the color of daffodils. It is the color of illness jaundice and the color of butter and egg yolk and things that are rich and nourishing. It is the color of cowardice in certain cultural traditions and the color of royalty in others. It is the color of autumn before winter, of warmth before cold, of the particular quality of afternoon light in October that makes everything look simultaneously beautiful and about to end. The people of Springfield are all of these things at once. The yellow of The Simpsons specifically is not the yellow of jaundice, it is more saturated than that, more deliberate, too flat and too consistent to read as illness in the visual context of the show's aesthetic. It reads as the color of the sun in a child's drawing. It reads as warmth and accessibility and the specific kind of cheerfulness that primary colors signal. It reads, most of all, as the color of a family that is meant to be likable, approachable, a family you want to spend time with, and yet, beneath all of that warmth, the radiation theory keeps pressing. Because the specific shade of yellow that characterizes Springfield's residents is also, if you tilt your interpretation even slightly, the color of something that has absorbed too much of something else. Radioactive materials in popular culture are often depicted as glowing green. This is not accurate to actual physics, but it has become a visual shorthand. Springfield's power plant conforms to this. The radioactive rod in the opening sequence, the glow in the river, the particular quality of the light around the cooling towers. The plant is associated with green in the show's visual language. But what happens to living tissue when it absorbs something over a long period of time, when it incorporates an environmental factor slowly, gradually, in amounts too small to produce immediate visible effects but large enough to accumulate? It changes. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Gradually, in ways that begin to seem normal to the organism experiencing the change, because the change happens slowly enough that there is no clear before and after, no moment of transformation, just the slow arrival of a new normal. The yellow could be the new normal. It could be the color that Springfield's residents have become over the course of what the show implies has been decades of exposure to the plant's ambient output. Not sick enough to collapse, not damaged enough to die, but altered, carried in their skin, visible to anyone who cares to look, normalized by the fact that everyone in their environment looks the same. The comparison to real-world environmental contamination is not fanciful. There are real places in the real world where populations have been changed by chronic exposure to industrial pollutants, places where the change took the form of elevated rates of certain illnesses, of specific developmental differences in children born in the area, of physical markers that epidemiologists could identify statistically, but that the people living with them normalized as simply how things were. The contamination was real, the effect was real, and the people living with it did not, for the most part, look at each other and think they were different. They looked at each other and thought this was what people looked like. Springfield's yellow is the whole town looking at each other and thinking this is what people look like. There is something deeply human in that. The capacity to normalize the conditions of your own existence, to take whatever the world has made of you and call it yourself, is one of the most fundamental mechanisms of psychological survival. You are not your contamination. You are not your trauma. You are not the residue of everything that has been done to you by the systems you were born into. You are yourself, but yourself is shaped by those things, marked by them, carrying them in ways that are sometimes invisible and sometimes quite visible if someone knows how to look. Springfield carries its history in its skin, yellow, warm, strange, beloved. Let your own skin feel the weight of the sheets or the blanket or the clothes you're wearing, depending on how you've arranged yourself for sleep. Feel the temperature of the air on your face, your hands, whatever is exposed. This is your skin, your particular interface with the world, the thing that contains you and receives the world's information, and has been doing this since you were born. It has absorbed everything. It carries everything. It is yours. The yellow people of Springfield are sleeping in their yellow beds in their yellow houses, under the glow of the plant that made them yellow. And if they could see it from the outside, they might think it was beautiful. Expanded Section 4. Homer's Coma, the Emotional Architecture. There are things about the coma theory that the fan discussion tends to skip past in its eagerness to establish the evidence and confirm the mechanics. There is the logic of the theory, the argument that Homer's dreaming brain is producing the increasingly surreal content of the show's later seasons. And then there is the feeling of the theory, which is a different thing and, in some ways, a more important one. Let me tell you about the feeling. Homer Simpson, in the years before his coma, in the seasons before the show became the thing it became in its middle and later years, was a character engaged with the specific struggles of a working-class American man at the end of the 20th century. He worried about money. He worried about his job. He worried, in his inarticulate, frequently failing way, about his children's futures. He wanted to be a better father than he had the tools to be. He wanted to be a better husband than his appetites allowed. He was, in the early seasons, a man you could see whole, his limitations as visible as his love, his failures as present as his good intentions. The coma, in this reading, does not transform Homer. It reveals him. It strips away the particulars of his external life and exposes what is at the center of his inner life, which turns out to be his family. Always his family. Every adventure the dreaming Homer goes on, every impossible scenario his unconscious produces, every celebrity and every catastrophe, and every world-altering event that the show sends him through in its later seasons, all of it is decorated with the same constant. Marge and Bart and Lisa and Maggie. They are always there. They survive every reset. They persist through every crazed storyline, back to the house on Evergreen Terrace, because they are the only thing Homer's dreaming mind will not let go of. This is not a small observation about a character. This is a revelation about the nature of a person. Under all the comedy, under all the failing and the obliviousness and the moments of spectacular selfishness, Homer Simpson is a man whose core is entirely occupied by the people he loves. The dream strips him of everything else, and what remains is this: a husband, a father, a man who wants to be home. The show has a recurring image that the coma theory colors into something devastating. It is the image of Homer, at the end of an episode's adventure, finding his way back to the house, standing in front of it. The yellow walls, the green lawn, the front door, he goes inside. The family is there, the episode ends, the next episode begins, and the reset has occurred, and we are back at the beginning of the loop. If Homer is dreaming, this image is his deepest wish expressed in visual form. Not the adventure, not the resolution of whatever crisis the episode has staged, the house, the family inside, the going home. That moment Homer at the front door, the house in front of him, the warmth behind the windows, is the thing the dream is always reaching toward, and always, by design, achieving. Because in the dream, Homer always makes it home. He always makes it home because the dream is about making it home. It has always been about making it home. Think about what this says about who we believe people to be versus who they actually are at the center of themselves. Homer is read as selfish, stupid, oblivious. His public biography, the safety inspector who sleeps at his station, the husband who forgets anniversaries, the father who chokes his son as a running joke, does not suggest someone whose core is rich with love. But the dream suggests that the core is exactly that. That beneath all the comedic failure, beneath all the spectacular imperfection, there is a man who is oriented entirely toward the people he loves, who keeps dreaming his way home because home is the only destination that matters. The coma theory is, at its most profound, a theory about the difference between a person's surface and their center, about how often those two things are in discordance, and how rarely the surface, the behavior, the choices, the visible record accurately represents what's happening at the level where it matters most. Springfield allows Homer to be both. To be the surface Homer, the failing, funny, frustrating Homer that the comedy requires, and the center Homer, the one whose dream keeps producing the people he loves in perfect, ageless, permanent form. Both are true. The surface and the center coexist. The comedy and the love coexist. That is the human truth the coma theory is pointing toward. Not that Homer is secretly good, not that his failures don't matter, but that a person is more than the sum of their visible failures, that the inner life contains things the outer life doesn't always show, that the dreaming mind reveals priorities that the waking life does not always honor. Homer's priority is his family. The coma reveals it because the coma removes everything else. Let your own priorities feel themselves for a moment. In the space between waking and sleeping, in the place where the day's noise has receded far enough that something quieter can be heard, what is there? What keeps coming back? What does your mind return to when there is nothing else to return it to? That is the center. That is the Homer Simpson of your own life. Let it be there. Let it be whatever it is. Let the dream take you toward it, the way dreams always do, in their sideways, imprecise, deeply accurate way. The house is ahead. The light is on. The family is inside. Homer is almost home. Expanded Section 5. Who shot Mr. Burns? Everything we still don't know. There are things about the shooting of Mr. Burns that the official resolution does not explain, and which the show has never gone back to address, and which sit at the edge of the mystery like loose threads that you can see but are instructed not to pull. The gun is Homer's gun. It turns up in the evidence, and it is identified as belonging to Homer. And this becomes one of the pieces of evidence that temporarily makes Homer the prime suspect. But how did Homer's gun end up in the situation it ended up in? The chain of custody of that gun is never quite satisfactorily established. It was Homer's gun. It was used to shoot Burns. Maggie got to it in the parking lot during the struggle over the lollipop. But where exactly was the gun between Homer's possession of it and Maggie's acquisition of it? The show handwaves this. The show is a comedy, and the purpose of the mystery was to create an entertainment event rather than a tightly constructed puzzle. And so the loose ends are acceptable within the genre requirements. But they are there. And the most interesting thing about loose ends is that they allow alternative explanations to persist. One alternative explanation, the one that has the most structural elegance, though not the most evidence, is that someone set the situation up, that the gun ending up in the parking lot at the moment of Burns's departure was not an accident, that someone who knew Burns's habits, knew his route, knew his schedule, knew that he carried a gun and that the gun could be turned against him, placed the weapon where it would be used. Smithers knew all of these things. Smithers managed Burns's schedule. Smithers had just been fired that day, fired by Burns for the specific act of moral objection, for protesting the sun-blocking plan on ethical grounds, for being the one loyal employee who finally reached a limit. Smithers's devotion to Burns is one of the show's most consistent character elements, but it is a devotion that has been shown, on occasion, to have conditions. To have a bottom beneath which Smithers will not go. The sun-blocking plan crossed that bottom. If Smithers set the gun in Burns's path, knowing Burns well enough to predict what would happen, knowing that an elderly man who stops to take candy from a baby will lose the gun when the baby grabs for it. Because Burns is frail, and babies are unpredictable, and the physics of the situation favor the baby, then the shooting is not Maggie's crime. It is Smithers's crime, accomplished at one remove by someone too devoted to Burns to confront him directly but capable, in a moment of extremity, of arranging for nature to take its course. This is speculation. This is fan theory. The show resolved the mystery, and Smithers was not the answer. But the theory survives the official resolution because the official resolution has its own holes. What we can say with confidence is that the shooting changed Springfield's relationship to Burns, at least briefly. It interrupted his omnipotence. It introduced, into the mythology of the town, the idea that Burns could be hurt, that he was not untouchable, not immune to the physical laws that governed everyone else in Springfield, that there existed an angle of approach that could reach him. That the angle of approach turned out to be a baby with a lollipop is either the show's funniest joke or its most profound observation, depending on your disposition. The most powerful man in town, the one who has controlled everything and everyone for decades, was stopped by someone too small and too young to have learned yet that you are not supposed to stop Mr. Burns. Maggie didn't know she couldn't, so she did. There is something liberating in that, even if Maggie did not intend it that way. Even if the shooting was, as officially described, an accident, a baby grabbing a gun and the gun going off and Burns going down, the mechanism was accident. The result was Burns lying on the sundial, temporarily stopped, temporarily mortal, temporarily visible as someone who could be stopped. Springfield saw it. And then Springfield forgot it, because Springfield forgets. But for one moment, in the parking lot, in the fading light of an evening when everyone in town had reached their limit with Burns, the system was interrupted. Even accidents can be important. Even the smallest hand can be the one that tips the balance. Remember that if it feels useful to remember. Expanded Section 6. Burns's longevity. The accumulation of a century. Let's spend more time with Burns's age. Not the comic version of it, the jokes about his confusion between contemporary and ancient, his inability to recognize modern technology, the specific comedy of a very old man encountering a world that has become unrecognizable, but the weight of it. What it would actually mean to have been alive for as long as Burns has been alive. He has seen the internal combustion engine become the dominant mode of transportation, and then has watched that dominance begin to be questioned. He has seen the telephone go from a novelty item available to wealthy households to something that every person on Earth carries in their pocket. He has seen 2 world wars and Korea and Vietnam and everything after. He has seen the rise and fall of empires, the creation and destruction of political systems, the transformation of the American economy from agricultural to industrial to service to whatever it currently is. He has outlived, presumably, everyone he knew as a young man, everyone he went to school with, everyone he loved or hated or worked alongside in the early decades of his career. All of them are gone. The world they shared is gone. The references they would have understood, the jokes they would have laughed at, the fears they would have recognized as their own, all of that is historical now, the province of textbooks and museums rather than living memory. Burns is the last living repository of an enormous amount of experience that no one else shares. He is, in that sense, profoundly alone. His memory connects him to a world that no longer exists and that no one around him has access to. When he references a political figure from the 1920s with the casual familiarity of someone who met them personally, the people around him do not respond as if this is normal. They respond with confusion, or they do not respond at all, and Burns moves on because he has long since learned not to expect anyone to follow him into the parts of his history that predate their births. This isolation of extreme old age, the experience of having outlived your entire context, is one of the genuinely melancholy things that the show has built into Burns without always developing fully. He is not sympathetic in the ways that would invite easy emotional response. His longevity has not made him wise or kind or generous. It has calcified him into a more perfect version of what he always was, what might be called his essential Burnsness. Stripped of whatever external moderating forces might once have existed. People who were his peers, who might have challenged him or balanced him or provided some friction against his worst impulses, are all dead. There is no one left to push back from a position of equality. The only person who has something like equality with Burns is Smithers, and Smithers's equality is of a very specific kind, an equality of knowledge, of complicity, of shared tenure in a relationship that has lasted longer than any normal employment relationship should. Smithers knows Burns better than anyone else alive. He knows his medical protocols, his dietary requirements, his phobias, his genuine moments of pleasure, his moments of vulnerability, his capacity for cruelty, and his rare and surprising capacity for something that, in better circumstances, might have become affection. Their relationship is one of the show's most fascinating ongoing puzzles. It is not what it appears to be from the outside. It is not simple devotion. It is not simple exploitation. It is a relationship that has survived long enough that both parties have become defined by it, shaped by it, unable to exist as fully themselves outside of it. Burns without Smithers is a man with no support system in a world that has become alien to him. Smithers without Burns is a man whose entire professional and, arguably, emotional life has been organized around someone else, leaving him with the unsettling question of what he is when that organization is removed. They need each other in ways that neither is quite willing to articulate, and so they continue, season after season, the ancient billionaire and his devoted assistant, locked in something that the show has never quite resolved and presumably never intends to, because the irresolution is part of what makes it interesting. Burns will continue. He has always continued. There are mechanisms in place to ensure his continuation, as we have discussed the medical protocols, the treatments, the Smithers who manages the schedule, the wealth that can purchase whatever the body requires. He is a maintenance project. He has been a maintenance project for decades. The project will continue as long as the resources do, and the resources are effectively inexhaustible, which means Burns is effectively inexhaustible. He will be in his office when you wake up. He will be watching Springfield from his window with those pale, precise eyes. He will have a plan. He has always had a plan. Let that be something that you can set down for tonight. You don't have to contend with Burns. You don't have to find a way around him or resist him or change the structure he has built. You are outside the town. The town is behind you. The plan is someone else's problem. Your only job right now is to be heavy, to be still, to let the night do its work on you. Burns can wait until morning. Everything can wait until morning. Expanded Section 7. Maggie's Waiting the Longer Theory. The case for Maggie Simpson as the show's most significant figure rests on one central observation. She has been accumulating resources, attention, information, capability, experience for over 30 years, and she has not yet deployed them fully. Every other character in the show is, in one sense or another, used up. Their capacities are known. Their patterns are established. We know what Homer will do in a crisis. We know what Marge will tolerate, and at what point she will not tolerate it. We know Bart's bluster and the loyalty beneath it, Lisa's conviction and the loneliness beneath that. These characters have revealed themselves to us over hundreds of hours of storytelling. Maggie has not fully, not in the way that would let you say you know her. This is partly the nature of depicting an infant over a long-running series, an infant who cannot grow up, who cannot develop, who must remain the baby because the story requires it. But it is also something the show has cultivated deliberately, deepened deliberately, made meaningful deliberately. Maggie's silence is not just a production choice. It is a character choice. The show has given her multiple opportunities to speak and has each time stepped back from it, maintained the silence, preserved the mystery. In the episode where she speaks her first word, Daddy, the show handles the moment with unusual delicacy. It is quiet, it is late at night, no one else is in the room. Maggie says Daddy, and the scene ends, and the next episode begins, and the word is not referenced, not built on, not developed. It was said, and it was real, and then the show put the silence back. Because the silence is the point. Maggie's silence is the most carefully maintained piece of characterization in the show. Everything else has bent over time. Character traits have evolved. Backstories have been revised. Personalities have shifted in response to the needs of storytelling. But Maggie's silence has held. 30-plus years and the baby does not speak. The baby watches. What the baby has watched is one of the most intensive educations in Springfield's history. She has watched Homer navigate poorly, usually the world's continuous demands. She has watched Marge maintain the household through sheer force of will and love. She has watched Bart be brave in the ways that don't require language. She has watched Lisa be brilliant and lonely. She has watched the town around her do everything the town does, forget, repeat, deny, occasionally surprise itself with decency. She has watched Mr. Burns. She shot Mr. Burns. She knows what Burns is in a way that no other Simpson does, because she is the only one who has physically confronted him, who has stood in a parking lot with him in a moment that was not staged and not managed and not filtered through the layers of institutional power that usually insulate Burns from direct encounter. She has looked at him close up. She has been in his grip. And then she has not been in his grip, because the gun went off and Burns fell. She knows Burns is stoppable. She knows this from direct experience. And she has been sitting with this knowledge, in her crib and at the dinner table and in the back seat of the car, for all the years since. The question is not whether Maggie will eventually act on what she knows. The question is when, and under what circumstances, And in what form? These are questions the show has never answered. They may be questions the show will never answer. But the fact that they are open, the fact that Maggie remains the one character whose future is truly unwritten, that is itself an argument for her significance. Every other character in Springfield is, in the truest sense, already finished. Their stories have been told in enough variation that the basic shape is clear. But Maggie is still becoming. In a town where becoming is largely impossible, where the floating timeline prevents anyone from arriving at the next version of themselves, Maggie is the exception, the one who might actually get somewhere, the one whose story has not yet been told in full. If Springfield ever changes, Maggie will be why. Let that idea rest with you. The quiet one, the one who watches, the one who knows something that no one else knows and is waiting for the right moment to act on it. There is power in patience. There is intelligence in silence. There is a kind of strength that accumulates in stillness, the way a spring accumulates tension, the way pressure builds towards something, not an explosion, just a release, a precise and necessary release at exactly the right moment. You can rest now. Let the stillness accumulate in you the way it accumulates in Maggie. Tomorrow you can act. Right now, there is just this quiet. Expanded Section 8. The floating timeline. What eternity actually feels like. There is a question I want to ask you, which you don't have to answer aloud and don't have to answer at all. But let it sit in you while I keep talking. When you think of the place where you grew up not as it is now, but as it was then, when you were in it and it was fully present, what age are you? Most people, when they return in memory to the formative places of their lives, return at a specific age. The age at which the place was most fully itself to them. The age at which they were most fully themselves to the place. For some people, this is childhood. For some, it is adolescence. For some, it is the early years of adulthood, the first apartment, the first sense of being in the world on your own terms. The Springfield of the show is always 1989 in this sense. Not in terms of technology or cultural reference, those have updated continuously. The show has always been in the present of its broadcast, but in terms of who the characters are. They are perpetually the people they were when the show began. The Simpson children are perpetually the children they were in the pilot. Homer and Marge are perpetually the people they were when they were first shown to us. They are locked at the age at which they were most fully themselves to the story. This produces something strange when you watch the show across time. The episodes from the early 1990s feel different from episodes from the early 2000s. Which feel different from recent episodes, and not only because the animation style has evolved, not only because the cultural references have changed, but because the world around The Simpsons has aged and they have not. In early episodes, the gap between the characters and their contemporary cultural context is small. By recent episodes, the gap has become enormous. Homer in 1989 is a man of his time. Homer in 2025 is somehow the same age, the same person, in a world that has moved 35 years beyond him while he remained where he started. There is a word for this in certain literary traditions. The word is preserved. Something preserved in the old way in salt, in amber, in ice, is chemically maintained at a specific moment, held against decay through external intervention. The Springfield characters are preserved. The intervention is the ongoing broadcast of the show, the ongoing decision to keep them at these ages, to not let time touch them. As long as the show runs, the preservation continues. As long as people watch, the amber holds. What lives in amber is not alive in the full sense. It does not grow, it does not develop. It is permanently, perfectly the thing it was at the moment of preservation. It is beautiful in its way to see something held against time, held against the decay and transformation that time brings to everything, but it is also a kind of stillness that has something of death in it. The Simpsons are held against time. They are beautiful because of it, and limited because of it simultaneously. They will never be diminished by what aging does to things. They will also never experience what aging gives to things. Bart will never know what it feels like to be 15. He will never have his first experience of adult responsibility, his first real loss, his first understanding of the world as something that does not accommodate his particular needs. He will be perpetually in the moment before all of that, alive with the energy of someone who is still fully in childhood, who has not yet started the long negotiation with the world that adult life requires. Lisa will never know what it is to be a grown woman with her gifts, navigating a world that might or might not be equipped to receive them. She will never publish the work she clearly would publish, never find the community she clearly would find, never experience the particular relief of discovering that the world is, in fact, larger than Springfield. She will be perpetually eight, perpetually gifted and lonely, perpetually in the position of someone who sees clearly and cannot find anyone to see clearly with her. These are losses. The floating timeline preserves the characters and simultaneously denies them. But, and here is the turn, what it does for us is different. For us, the audience, the preservation is a gift. We get to return. We get to find them exactly as we left them. We get to experience, in the specific way of television, the renewal of something we already know, the pleasure of the familiar made fresh by returning to it. When you go back to the early seasons of the show, you are not going back in the way you go back to an old photograph with nostalgia and the ache of time. You are going back in the way you go back to a book you love, with the particular pleasure of re-entering something that is still fully itself, still alive, still doing the thing it does. The early episodes are not relics. They are not historical documents. They are Springfield, which is always now. This is what the floating timeline is buying with its cost. It is buying permanent return. It is buying the door that always opens back to the same place. Whatever has changed in your own life, and it will have changed, it always changes. Springfield has not changed. You can go there and find it as it was. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, for many people, quite a lot. Expanded Section 9. Predictions. The deeper mechanism. The Simpsons' relationship to the future is not supernatural. It has been established that the predictive quality of the show is largely attributable to two things: the volume of content produced over a very long time, and the quality of attention that the show's writers brought to observing American culture and extrapolating its trajectories. But there is a third factor that rarely gets discussed, and it is perhaps the most interesting one. The Simpsons did not just observe American culture. American culture observed The Simpsons. The show was so enormously popular, for so long, that it became a part of American culture, a lens through which Americans thought about their institutions, their political systems, their relationship to wealth and power and media. The show shaped the consciousness of a generation of people who grew up watching it, and those people went on to work in entertainment, in politics, in technology, in every sector of American life. They carried the show's satirical framework with them. They saw American institutions through the show's eyes. When those people encountered situations that resembled things the show had depicted, they thought in terms the show had given them. They understood corporate power in part through the framework of Burns and the plant. They understood the tension between individual expression and institutional conformity in part through the framework of Lisa and Springfield Elementary. They understood the absurdity of civic dysfunction in part through the framework of Chief Wiggum and Mayor Quimby. The show did not just predict things. The show gave people ways of thinking about things, and those ways of thinking influenced what people did, which influenced what happened. The predictions came true partly because the show created the conceptual infrastructure through which the predictions were processed, recognized, and acted upon. This is cultural influence at its most powerful. Not the direct influence of a message, not the show told us to do this and we did it, but the indirect influence of a framework. The show told us how to see things, and seeing things that way produced certain responses, and those responses had effects on the world. The Trump prediction is the clearest example. The show did not cause Trump to be elected, but the show did create, in the cultural consciousness, a category for the kind of figure Trump represented: the businessman turned politician, the man who treated political office as a reality television event, the celebrity whose relationship to actual governance was secondary to his relationship to his own image. The show had named and lampooned this category years before the specific individual who would embody it had become a serious political force. And so when that individual arrived, people had a place to put him. A category, a framework, a set of jokes that suddenly didn't feel like jokes. The show primed the cultural recognition. When the thing the show had predicted arrived, it arrived into a society that had already been told what it was and how to think about it. The prediction was a preparation. This might be the most unsettling version of the prediction phenomenon. When you think about it carefully, the show's predictions did not just come true. They came true in a way that the show's existence made more legible, more processable, more available as an object of cultural reference and reaction. Springfield did not reflect America. America grew towards Springfield because Springfield was a map of where America was going, and having the map made the journey feel familiar even as the destination approached. Springfield as map, as preparation, as the thing that tells you where you're going before you get there, not through prophecy but through the specific attention of a very smart group of people who were watching very carefully and saying, "Look, this is where the road leads." That is a remarkable thing for a cartoon to be. That is a remarkable thing for anything to be. Expanded Section 10. The Geography of the Impossible. Springfield has a ski slope. It has a beach. It has a canyon, the famous Springfield Gorge, into which Homer has fallen more than once. It has a forest, which has been the setting for various outdoor misadventures. It has agricultural land nearby, rolling hills and farmland that suggests a rural dimension to the region beyond the suburban core. It has industrial zones and commercial districts and a financial sector, however small. It has a waterfront and a downtown and various neighborhoods that the show has described or implied with enough consistency that you could draw a rough map, a very rough map, full of contradictions and impossible adjacencies that would give you some sense of Springfield's internal geography, even if it could not tell you where Springfield sits in relation to any real place. This impossible internal geography is worth dwelling on for a moment. The Springfield Gorge, for instance, is close enough to town that Homer can reach it on foot or by skateboard or by the various other means of transportation that episodes have used to get him there. But a gorge of the size the show depicts a canyon with sheer walls and a river far below, dramatic enough to be a genuine danger, does not naturally exist in proximity to a mid-sized American city. Canyons of that scale require millions of years of geological processes that produce landscapes of a certain character. The presence of a gorge suggests an arid or semi-arid environment, suggests a particular relationship between water and rock that shapes everything else in the region. And yet Springfield is not arid. It has 4 seasons. It has trees of the kind that grow in temperate climates. It has snow in winter and heat in summer, and everything in between. The gorge and the climate do not belong to the same geography, but they coexist in Springfield because Springfield is not constrained by the requirements of real geography. The beach is perhaps the most dramatic example. Ocean beaches, as a geographical feature, require an ocean. An ocean requires coastline of a particular kind, and coastline of that kind shapes the weather patterns, the ecology, the economy, and the culture of the surrounding region in specific and powerful ways. Coastal towns feel different from inland towns. The air tastes different, the light is different. The relationship to water, its sound, its smell, its rhythms becomes part of the background of daily life in a way that permanently alters how people experience time and space. Springfield has a beach and does not feel coastal. Springfield has a gorge and does not feel desert. Springfield has mountains and does not feel alpine. All of these environments are available when the story needs them and recede when they are not required, and the town absorbs each of them without being fundamentally changed by any of them, because Springfield is not a real place subject to the real pressures of real geography. It is a narrative space that can be configured as needed. There is something almost meditative about this, if you approach it the right way. A space without fixed geography is a space of pure possibility. Springfield can be anywhere because it is not constrained by where it is. The story can go anywhere because the space will accommodate it. The limitations are the limitations of imagination, not of terrain. Your imagination right now has no terrain either. In the space between waking and sleeping, the mind's geography is completely fluid. Mountains can appear and dissolve. Landscapes can shift and recombine. The rules of physical space do not apply. You can be anywhere, and the transitions between places do not require the explanations that waking life demands. Springfield in this sense is a dream space. It has always been a dream space. It follows dream logic rather than waking logic, and its geography is dream geography, the geography of what the story needs, what the image requires, what the feeling demands. Let your own geography go soft now. The room you are in, the house or apartment, the street outside, the city or town, let it all go a little blurry at the edges. Let Springfield's impossible landscape replace it, or coexist with it, or provide a second layer over it. You can be in both places. You can be in the half-sleeping awareness of your own bed and simultaneously on a street in Springfield, where the light is the particular light of late afternoon in an animated world, golden and slightly too saturated, warm in a way that real light rarely quite achieves. Both are real. Neither requires defense. Let them coexist the way things coexist in sleep. Expanded Section 11. The Tamzarian Principle. How Springfield Chooses Its Truth. The Armin Tamzarian episode is often cited as the moment the show jumped the shark, the moment its writers demonstrated that they were no longer willing to be constrained by the internal consistency that had characterized the show's earlier years. The fan resentment of the episode has been persistent and vocal, and the episode remains controversial in ways that most episodes, even bad ones, are not. But I think the resentment is misplaced. The resentment is aimed at the wrong thing. The episode is not good television in the conventional sense. It does not cohere as a story. Its emotional beats land awkwardly. Its resolution is rushed in a way that leaves the ending feeling arbitrary. These are fair criticisms. But the thing that most fans object to, the basic premise that the town would vote to maintain a lie over a truth, is not a failure of the show. It is one of the show's clearest insights. Communities choose their truths. This is not a cynical observation. It is simply accurate. The truth that a community maintains is not necessarily the factually accurate account of events. It is the account that the community can live with, that allows the community to continue functioning, that does not require the members of the community to make changes they are not capable of making or to hold responsibilities they are not willing to hold. In Armin Tamzarian's case, the community chose him because the real Seymour Skinner, the actual war hero, the actual person whose name and history Tamzarian had borrowed, was a disruption. He was proof that something had been wrong for a long time. His presence required acknowledgement that the person they had trusted and known and built relationships with was not who they thought he was. His presence required, at minimum, a period of adjustment and renegotiation that the community found too costly to pay. So they voted for the comfortable thing, the familiar thing, the thing that let them get back to their lives without having to do the work of reconstructing their understanding of the world they lived in. This happens. It happens in real communities, in real institutions, in real families. The truth that is maintained is not always the accurate truth. Sometimes it is the truth that functions, and the decision to maintain the functional truth over the accurate truth is not always made through deliberate dishonesty. Sometimes it is made through the quiet consensus of people who have decided, individually and collectively, that the cost of the accurate truth is too high right now. Springfield made this decision and made it explicitly, with a vote and a legal decree and the physical expulsion of the disruptive element. Most communities make the same decision without the formalities. The result is the same. The functional truth becomes the official truth. The accurate truth is marginalized. And anyone who keeps insisting on the accurate truth begins to seem like the problem rather than the solution. This is the principle and the popper's actual insight. Not that Springfield is especially corrupt or especially dishonest, but that Springfield is, in this respect, ordinary. Springfield is every community that has ever decided that the story they can live with matters more than the story that happened. Is that a failure? Is it a tragedy? Or is it a coping mechanism, adaptive, imperfect, human? The show does not answer this. The show presents the mechanism and leaves you to evaluate it, which is actually what the best satire does. It shows you the thing clearly enough that you can see it, and then it leaves the judgment to you. What would you have voted? In a town where the lie is 30 years old and the truth arrived 30 years too late, where the person who embodies the truth is a stranger, and the person who embodies the lie is your principal, your neighbor, the man who gave you your detention slip and attended your graduation, what would you have voted? Most people, I think, would have voted for the lie. Not because they are bad, because the lie has become, by then, more real than the truth. The lie has been lived. It has relationships attached to it, memories attached to it, the full weight of 3 decades of daily life attached to it. The truth is an abstraction, a correction, something that arrived too late to be incorporated smoothly. Springfield chose the lie, and we, in our most honest moments, understand why. Expanded Section 12. Ned Flanders and the Theology of Suffering. Let me stay with Ned for a little longer, because there is something in his story that deserves more than a quick pass. Ned Flanders believes in God. He believes with the kind of consistency that is either admirable or pathological depending on your point of view, and the show has always been careful to present it as both simultaneously. His faith is real. His faith has sustained him through things that should have broken him, and his faith has, on multiple occasions, been tested in ways that the show handles with more seriousness than you might expect. The question that Ned's faith raises, the one that the show plants quietly and never quite addresses directly, is the question of what it means to believe in a God who is both demonstrably present in the show's universe and demonstrably uninterested in rewarding goodness. The show's God is not a mystery in the way that real-world theological debates about God's existence make God a mystery. The show's God exists. He has appeared on screen. He has had conversations with characters. He has intervened in events. He is available and real within the show's universe in a way that the God of real-world faith is not unambiguously available and real, and Homer has spoken with him multiple times. Homer, who does not practice faith in any consistent way, who behaves in ways that the moral framework of virtually every major religious tradition would identify as problematic, who is self-interested and oblivious and prone to doing harm through thoughtlessness rather than malice. Homer has had personal audiences with God. Ned has not. This is a remarkable and quietly devastating detail. The show's God, who is real and available, chooses to communicate with Homer over Ned, the drunk over the devout, the man who barely tries over the man who tries constantly. This is either a statement about the inscrutable nature of grace, the idea that God's attention is not meritocratic, that it does not follow the human logic of reward and punishment, or it is a darker statement about what the show believes happens to people who organize their lives around moral effort in a world where moral effort is not rewarded. Ned has had more than his share of loss. He lost his wife. He has been a reliable absorber of collateral damage from Homer's selfishness over 30 years. He has had his property damaged, his possessions borrowed and unreturned, his patience tested in ways that his psychological conditioning barely allows him to acknowledge as tests. And he endures. He endures with a cheerfulness that we now understand to be maintained at cost, produced by the conditioning of his childhood, available to him through effort rather than ease. And he prays. And the God who talks to Homer does not talk to him. The show never explains this. It is not a plot point. It is a background condition of Ned's existence, built into the architecture of the show's world without ever being named or addressed. The devout man does not receive divine communication. The undevout man does, casually, as a side effect of his generally chaotic existence. You can read this multiple ways. You can read it as a statement about the arbitrariness of grace, which is actually theologically sophisticated and maps onto certain traditional Christian ideas about election and calling. You can read it as a satirical observation about the relationship between religiosity and divine favor in popular culture. You can read it as simply something the show backed into through the requirements of individual episode plots and never thought through as a coherent statement. What I find most interesting is the reading that says, "The God of Springfield communicates with Homer because Homer needs it more." Ned has his practice, his community, his framework. Homer has nothing but his instincts and his love for his family and his spectacular inability to navigate the world without external assistance. God talks to Homer because Homer is the one who needs to be talked to. The devout person has already found their way to a relationship with something larger. The struggling person still needs directions. This is not a comfortable reading for anyone with a straightforward theology, but it is a compassionate one. And compassion, in Springfield, is rarely where you expect to find it. Expanded Section 13. The Edges, Hans Moleman, Minor Characters, and What They Tell Us. Hans Moleman is 31 years old. This detail is revealed in one episode and generally treated as a throwaway joke. A quick absurdist note in the key of the show's broader comedy of the horrible. He appears elderly. He moves slowly. He has the specific physical presentation of someone who has lived a very long life under conditions that were not particularly kind to the body. And yet he is 31. The radiation theory has an explanation for this, of course. If the ambient contamination around the plant can produce mutations, 3 eyes on fish, 4 fingers on humans, biological irregularities of various kinds, then it might also produce accelerated aging, cellular deterioration at a rate faster than normal, producing the appearance of advanced age in someone who has not actually advanced very far in calendar years. Moleman looks 90. He is 31. The gap between how he looks and how old he is a measure of what Springfield has done to him. He is also, this bears repeating, essentially indestructible despite his apparent fragility. He dies and he comes back. He absorbs impacts that should be fatal and reappears. He is, in this regard, the most extreme example of the biological anomaly that the show demonstrates throughout Springfield's population, the inability of Springfield's residents to stay dead, the way injury and even death fail to produce the outcomes they would produce in a world operating on normal biological rules. If the radiation theory is correct, Springfield's residents have been mutated into something that the ordinary rules of biology do not fully apply to. Homer survives things that should kill him. Moleman survives things that do kill him, technically, and then comes back anyway. Burns has lived for over a century. The population of Springfield is not dying on any normal schedule. This could be the show's most profound implication. A town irradiated for decades that has produced a population with fundamentally altered biology. A population that may have achieved, through the specific mutations produced by chronic nuclear exposure, a kind of biological resilience that looks from the outside like invulnerability, not immortality. Not the engineered immortality that Burns maintains through medical intervention. Something more accidental, more distributed, more democratic. Springfield as a whole has become, through the plant's ongoing output, something other than ordinarily human. The comedy of Moleman is built on the horror of this. The joke that someone dies every few episodes and comes back without explanation is funny because it is absurd. The horror beneath the joke is that it might make a certain kind of sense if you follow the implications of the show's world-building far enough. Springfield's biology is different. Springfield's residents live by different rules. And no one is asking why, because the people who should be asking are also subject to the same rules and have developed, along with the biological changes, the particular cognitive style that prevents them from noticing. The edges of Springfield's story, the minor characters, the background residents, the people like Moleman who exist in the margins of the main narrative, are where the show's darkest implications live most comfortably. The main family must be protected from full darkness by the requirements of comedy and love. The minor characters have no such protection. They can be used to demonstrate what the world of Springfield really is, without the softening that the show applies to the people it most needs its audience to love. Moleman is what happens to someone when Springfield is fully applied to them without protection or resources or the particular good fortune of being someone the story cares about. He is the town's truth, rendered in the body of a small, suffering, repeatedly dying old man who is younger than he looks. Pay attention to the edges. That is where the real story lives. Expanded final section. The loop closes everything together at last. We have been in Springfield for a long time. Long enough that the town has begun to feel like a real place, not the real place of something you could visit, not the real place of geography and coordinates, but the real place of somewhere you have spent time, somewhere you know the layout of, somewhere you would recognize if you came back to it. That is, in the end, what Springfield is. It is a place you come back to. One of the show's most profound achievements, over 30 years, is the production of a fictional location that functions in the audience's imagination, the way a real place functions as a repository of memory, as a space where specific experiences happened that you carry with you, as somewhere that exists in you rather than on a map. You have memories of Springfield. You may have a specific episode that was the first one that made you laugh until you couldn't stop. You may have a line of dialogue that has lodged in you permanently that you find yourself thinking of in unexpected moments when it turns out to be more applicable than you would have predicted. You may have a character whose particular qualities you find yourself thinking about when you encounter their equivalent in the real world, the Burns in your workplace, the Ned in your neighborhood, the Lisa in your school who saw everything clearly and was not thanked for it. Springfield has colonized your imagination, gently and over time, the way places do. And this means that Springfield is yours, in a sense that is more than metaphorical. You built it too. Every viewing, every memory, every time you returned to it, you added to it. You made it larger and more yours. The show provided the material, and you assembled a specific version of it that no one else has assembled in exactly the same way. Your Springfield is not quite the same as anyone else's Springfield. It is inflected by when you found the show, at what age, in what circumstances, with what other people. It is inflected by which episodes you saw first and which you are still waiting to see. It is inflected by the things you were going through when you watched it and the ways those things made you receive the stories differently than you would have received them in other circumstances. This is true of every work of fiction that matters to people. It is more dramatically true of a work that has lasted long enough and been seen by enough people that each person's version of it has had decades to develop its own character. Your Springfield is a collaboration between you and the show. The show gave you the elements. You gave them meaning. And tonight, the collaboration continues. The town is here, in the dark, in the space between your waking mind and your sleeping one. It is here because you called it up, because you wanted to spend time in it, because there is something in Springfield that you needed access to tonight. Whether that is the comfort of familiar things, or the particular pleasure of thinking through ideas that are complex enough to be interesting but not so urgent that they prevent rest. Whether it is the company of characters you have known for years, the reassurance of a story that always finds its way back to the beginning. Whatever brought you here tonight, the town receives you. The door is always open. Marge is in the kitchen. The sound of it is a kind of music, the particular music of a house where things are being done, where the domestic life is in motion, where someone is maintaining the space that makes all the other things possible. She doesn't need to be remarkable to be essential. She is the ground the family walks on. She is the reason the house is a home. Homer is somewhere close by, maybe in his chair, maybe asleep already, which would be appropriate, which would be in character, which would be one of the show's most perfectly observed jokes about the man that he can fall asleep anywhere, under any circumstances, with extraordinary efficiency, as if sleep is the natural state to which his body returns the moment the demands on it slacken even slightly. Or maybe he is awake and looking at the ceiling and thinking about something he cannot articulate, some feeling that his vocabulary is not adequate to express, some awareness of how lucky he is that he will not find language for, but that is nevertheless there. Bart is out on the street. Of course he is. It is later than he should be out. It is past any reasonable time for an 11-year-old to be unsupervised, and he is out there anyway, on his skateboard or walking or sitting somewhere looking at the sky. He is alone in the way that feels like freedom rather than loneliness. He is in the night, which is his element in a way it is not for his parents, not for his sister. Bart belongs to the unofficial hours. He is most himself when no one is watching. Lisa is at her window. She does this. She sits at her window in the evening, and she looks out at Springfield, at the particular skyline of this town she was born into and has never left, at the towers of the plant in the distance, at the lights of Moe's Tavern and the school and the houses of all the people she knows and has complicated feelings about, and she thinks about what she wants to do with her life, which is a lot for an 8-year-old to hold, but Lisa has always held a lot. She thinks about justice and music and the kind of person she wants to be when she is allowed to be more fully herself. She thinks about leaving and she thinks about staying, and she has not yet at 8 years old found a way to do either one that feels right. And Maggie is asleep. In her crib, in the room that has been hers for 30 years, her breathing is even. Her pacifier moves slightly with each breath. Her enormous eyes are closed, finally, the watching suspended for the hours of night that even Maggie cannot watch through. But the mind behind those eyes is not idle. The mind behind those eyes is processing, filing, integrating, taking everything that the day has given it and incorporating it into the vast, patient project of becoming someone who will, when the time is right, be extraordinary. The dreams Maggie has are private. We cannot see them. They are the one truly inaccessible space in the whole story, the inner life of the character who keeps the most inside, the mind that watches everything and gives nothing back, the future that is still entirely unwritten. Let your own mind be like that right now. Private, processing, not available for inspection, not required to produce anything, not being watched or evaluated, just yours. The night is doing something to you right now, something slow and careful and necessary. Sleep is not empty time. Sleep is when the mind does the work that cannot be done while you are awake and defended and managing. It is when the day's material is sorted and the important things are filed, and the body repairs itself in the incremental way that bodies repair themselves, and whatever you are in the process of becoming takes another small, invisible step toward becoming. Springfield knows about this. Springfield has been doing it for 30 years, processing and filing and repairing and remaining, improbably, itself. Deeply strange and deeply familiar. Terrifying and beloved. A town you can never quite leave because you carry it with you, in the specific way that stories become part of you when you have loved them long enough. The plant is humming. The river is carrying its glow toward whatever morning brings. The tire fire burns with the particular patience of something that has decided not to stop, that has found in its burning the reason to continue burning, that will be there in the morning as it has been every morning. The Simpson family is in their house on Evergreen Terrace. The light is on. It is always on. You can close your eyes all the way now. You have been here long enough. You know the way around. You can find your way back whenever you want to, because the town is always there, and the door is always open, and the story is always ready to begin again from exactly where you need it to begin. The loop holds. The light is on. Springfield will be here in the morning. It always is. End of sleep narration script. Fall asleep to the entire story of Springfield and why it's terrifying. Bonus section. The stories between the stories, what the episodes don't show. There is a version of Springfield that exists only in the spaces between episodes. The gaps, the hours and days and weeks that the show never depicts, because the show only shows us the stories, the crises, the adventures, the escalations. It does not show us the ordinary time. And the ordinary time, in any life, is most of the time. Think about what Springfield looks like in the ordinary time. The Tuesday afternoons when nothing is happening, when Homer is at his station and actually awake, when Marge is doing the laundry and listening to the radio and having thoughts that the show will never have reason to share with us, when Bart is at school and sitting at his desk and doing the particular work of being a child in an institution, absorbing, resisting, accommodating, performing, surviving, when Lisa is in her room and the saxophone is out, but she hasn't started playing yet and she is just sitting with the instrument in the quiet of a house that is, for a moment, not in crisis. This version of Springfield is the most human version. It is the version that resembles how life actually feels from the inside, not the peaks and the crises and the escalations, but the ordinary time, the vast middle distance of a life, the Tuesday afternoons that feel like they matter and feel like they don't simultaneously. The show gives us the story time and withholds the ordinary time, because ordinary time does not make good television. But the ordinary time is where the characters most fully live. It is where the relationships actually happen, not in the moments of dramatic confrontation, not in the episodes where everything is at stake, but in the daily, quiet, unremarkable maintenance of a life together. Marge and Homer have this. In the ordinary time, the time the show doesn't show, they have 30 years of Tuesday afternoons. Meals shared without drama. Evenings on the couch watching something neither of them fully concentrates on. Conversations that go nowhere interesting and end without resolution and are exactly what a long partnership consists of, mostly when you are being honest about it. These moments are not the moments of the show, but they are the foundation of the show. They are what makes the dramatic moments matter, because you feel, without having been shown, that there is a whole life underneath the story the show is telling you. This is one of the things great character work does. It creates the impression of a life that extends beyond what you are shown. It produces characters who feel as though they have experiences you are not privy to, who continue existing when they are off-screen, who have interiority and history, and the kind of depth that makes a brief glimpse feel like recognition rather than introduction. The Simpsons have this. They have had 30 years to accumulate it. By now, the sense of their off-screen lives is so rich and so established that you can imagine, without difficulty, what a random Tuesday afternoon in their house would feel and sound and smell like. You have been there enough in the story time to extrapolate the ordinary time. That is remarkable. That is the show having succeeded at the hardest thing fiction can attempt, making you believe in people who do not exist. The ordinary time of Springfield is beautiful in the way that ordinary time is always secretly beautiful if you are paying enough attention. The particular quality of afternoon light through the windows of a house you know well. The sound of a television in another room. The smell of something cooking. The sense of a family as a kind of climate, a weather system that you are always inside, that you can predict but not control, that shapes the experience of every day without being the subject of any day. The Simpsons are a climate. You live in their climate for the duration of an episode, and you come out changed in small ways, and you go back to your own climate, carrying something from theirs. Let that exchange be happening right now. Let the climate of Springfield settle around you warm and slightly chaotic, and fundamentally, stubbornly, irrepressibly loving. Let it be the weather of this particular night. You are inside it. You are welcome here. Bonus Section 2. The secondary characters and their secret depths. Springfield is populated by dozens of characters beyond the Simpsons themselves, and many of them have been given more internal architecture than the show's format would seem to require. Secondary characters in sitcoms are typically functional. They serve the plot, provide the context, exist in relation to the main characters rather than in their own right. Springfield's secondary characters are different. They have backstories. They have desires and fears that occasionally surface. They have the capacity to surprise you. Apu Nahasapi Mapetalon, who operates the Quick E-Mart on the corner of a street that the show has never quite consistently named, is one of the most complex and, over the show's history, most debated of these characters. He has a PhD. He has a large family. He has a relationship to his work that is not the relationship of a man who chose this job, but of a man who has made peace with circumstances, who has found in the ordinary demands of running a convenience store a kind of dignity that is his own, that does not require anyone else's validation. The controversy around Apu about representation, about the voice performance, about whether a character like him does more harm than good, is real and worth taking seriously. But it exists alongside the fact that Apu, as written, is one of the show's fullest secondary characters. His intelligence, his warmth, his patience with customers who do not deserve patience, his relationship to his family and his community, these are not cartoon traits. They are specific and earned, the product of years of careful, small-moment characterization. Mo Sislak, the bartender, is another. Mo is lonely in a way that is the most specific and most legible kind of lonely. The loneliness of someone who is aware of it, who can name it, who has not found a way through it and is not sure one exists. He has had episodes devoted to his attempts to change his situation, to find connection, to be something other than what he is. They have not worked. He remains at the bar, tending to the people who need tending to, being the unlikely emotional support of a group of men who would not call themselves emotionally supported and could not survive without being so. There is something Mo does that the show has depicted in small moments that I find remarkable. He listens. He is genuinely, attentively present to the people at his bar, in a way that the show uses mostly for comedy. The bartender, who hears confessions, who absorbs the complaints and the bragging and the grief of his regulars, but that reads, if you tilt your perspective, as a kind of vocation. Mo didn't set out to be the person who holds the community together in the dim light of an establishment that smells of old beer. But he is that person. And he takes the role seriously in the specific, unspoken way of someone who knows that what they do matters even if no one is going to name it or celebrate it. Ralph Wiggum, the son of the chief of police, is the show's purest expression of a certain kind of innocence. A child whose relationship to language and logic is so distinctive, so consistently and specifically non-standard, that the show has made him one of its most beloved minor characters without ever fully explaining what is happening with him. He says things that are unexpected. He makes connections that are not the connections others make. He exists in a slightly different relationship to the world than the other children around him, and this slightly different relationship produces, in him, a happiness that seems more stable and more genuine than the happiness of characters who are more fully engaged with the world's actual requirements. Ralph is loved. This is one of Springfield's most consistent emotional facts. He is loved by his family and by the audience and by the show itself, which treats him with a tenderness that it does not extend to everyone. There is something Springfield understands about Ralph, or something the show understands about children like Ralph, that it expresses in the specific quality of attention it gives him. The people of Springfield, in their secondary roles, are the evidence that the show's creators were doing something beyond the requirements of situation comedy. They were building a world populated by people who feel, even in their brief appearances, like they contain more than they show, like they have histories and futures and inner lives that extend beyond the frame. That kind of world building is rare. It requires sustained care over a long period of time. It requires the writers to think about who a person is rather than what role they serve. It requires the animators to give them specific physical expressions rather than generic ones. It requires the voice performers to find particular qualities in their voices rather than types. All of this is maintenance quiet, unglamorous, necessary maintenance of a fictional world that becomes more real with each year it continues. Springfield is more real now than it was in 1989. It has more residents, more history, more accumulated specificity. It is a richer and more complex place because it has had time to become one. Real towns work this way too. They accrue meaning. They develop personalities. They become more themselves over decades of being inhabited. Springfield has been inhabited by characters and by audiences for over 30 years. It shows. Bonus Section 3. The music of Springfield and what it does to you. The music of The Simpsons is one of the most recognizable bodies of television music in history. The theme, composed in the very early days of the show, is 50 seconds of orchestral comedy that has been heard by more people than most classical compositions will ever reach. It is triumphant and absurd simultaneously, a fanfare for something that deserves a fanfare in ways that are simultaneously obvious and mysterious. It tells you, every time you hear it, that you are about to be in Springfield. It prepares you. Music in television works differently from music in film, and differently again from music in real life. It cues you. It tells you how to feel before the story has told you what is happening. The theme of The Simpsons tells you, this is comic, this is warm, this is something you will recognize, this is safe to love. It gives you permission to relax your defenses. And then the show begins, and the story proceeds. And the music shifts to accommodate the story, the gentler pieces for the emotional moments, the comedic stings for the jokes, the particular musical vocabulary the show has developed over 30 years that its regular viewers absorb so completely that they no longer hear it consciously. The music is just there, part of the texture of the Springfield experience, doing its work of emotional direction so efficiently that you don't notice it doing it. The Danny Elfman theme. And it is worth noting that Elfman is one of the most distinctive musical personalities in American film and television. Someone whose work is immediately identifiable has something in it that goes beyond the requirements of situation comedy theme music. It has ambition. It reaches for something that the show's early content, the pilot and the first few seasons, was reaching for alongside it, the sense that this might be something more than what family sitcoms had previously been, something that had earned its fanfare. It was right. The show earned its fanfare, and the fanfare has played, week after week, for 30 years, telling an audience that has grown up with it and aged alongside it. You are here, you are in Springfield, you are home. Let the music play in your memory now, if it will. Not with effort, don't summon it, just let it come if it comes. The particular quality of it. The way it starts with something that sounds like triumph and curves into something that sounds like warmth and lands in the moment of the couch and the television, which is always somehow funny and always somehow right. If you can hear it, even a little, in the place where memories become sound, let it be the sound of the night finding its rhythm. Let it be the signal that you are somewhere you know, somewhere you have always been welcome, somewhere the story is ready to begin, and also, tonight, ready to let you rest inside it without requiring you to follow along. You don't have to follow along anymore. The show has been playing for 30 years, and it will play for however many more years it has. Tonight you can just be in the presence of it, the way you are, in the presence of music that is very familiar, not analyzing, not tracking, just bathed in it, the sound moving through you without stopping anywhere particular. The music of Springfield is yours. You have heard it enough that it lives in you. Let it be there. Let it be the soundtrack of this particular night, the last thing between you and sleep. The theme plays, the couch receives you, the television reflects your faces back at you, 4 yellow faces and 1 blue tower of hair. And the living room is warm, and the evening is here. Bonus Section 4, 3 decades of couch gags. The infinite variation. The couch gag is the show's most pure expression of its own self-awareness. Every episode begins the same way the family converges on the couch from various directions, and every episode subverts that sameness with a variation on the gag that can be anything from a quick 30-second joke to an elaborate set piece that takes up minutes of screen time and constitutes genuine short filmmaking in its own right. The couch gag is the show saying, you know what comes next? You always know what comes next. And then it doesn't give you what comes next. It gives you something you didn't expect. wearing the clothes of something you expected, and the gap between the expectation and the delivery is where the comedy lives. Over 3 decades, the couch gags have grown from simple subversions of the formula to increasingly elaborate meditations on the formula itself. Some of them have been animated by guest animators in completely different styles, turning the brief sequence into a collision between Springfield's visual language and some other visual language entirely. Some of them have been parodies of other cultural artifacts. Some of them have been pure absurdism, abandoning any relationship to the couch as a destination and sending the family through increasingly improbable journeys that end up somewhere completely different. The couch gags are also the show's most compressed expression of its relationship to time, because the family arrives at the couch at the end of every gag or doesn't, and this is itself a gag, and every time they do, the moment of the family together on the couch is reproduced. The destination is always the couch. The family is always there, together. The couch is the resolution of every variation, the home of every deviation from home. Think about what the couch represents in the visual logic of the show. It is the center of the house, which is the center of the family, which is the center of Springfield in the narrative sense, the point around which everything orbits, the place everything returns to. The couch is not glamorous. It is not significant in the way that the plant is significant or the town hall is significant. It is just furniture. But it is their furniture, the family's specific piece of furniture, the place they land at the end of the day. Homer's impression is still in it. The particular sag on his side, the specific give of the cushion that knows his weight, the place on the arm where his hand rests, all of this is imprinted. The couch is the record of the family having been on it, night after night, for 30 years. It is worn with use in a way that is not diminishment. It is worn with love. The couch gag delivers them back to it every episode. No matter how far the gag has taken them through time, through space, through other animation styles and cultural references and meta-jokes about the nature of the show itself, the family ends up on the couch, together. Home. That is the gag's deepest joke, which is not a joke. That home is the destination. That after all the variation, all the deviation, all the comedy of the unexpected, the family arrives home, the couch receives them, the television turns on, and the episode begins. Bonus Section 5. What Springfield has given us a final accounting. Over 30 years, the show has given its audience things that are hard to quantify but easy to feel. Let me try to name some of them. It has given us a language. The specific vocabulary of Springfield, the phrases, the references, the shorthand, has become part of English in a way that most television content does not achieve. People quote the show without knowing they are quoting the show. The expressions have escaped the context of their origin and entered the general currency of how English speakers communicate. This is what happens when a work of art is sufficiently embedded in a culture, it stops being a source and becomes a medium. It has given us a framework for understanding certain American institutions that no other cultural artifact has quite replicated. The nuclear power plant and its relationship to the community, the billionaire and his relationship to the municipal government, the elementary school and its relationship to its students' actual needs versus its institutional requirements. These are not new subjects. Other works of art have addressed them, but The Simpsons addressed them with a consistency and a specificity over such a long time that it has shaped how a generation thinks about these things. The Burns in your workplace is named Burns because of the show. The Wiggum in your police department is named Wiggum because of the show. The show gave us these names for things that needed names. It has given us permission to find everyday life funny. The show's deepest formal argument, the argument embedded in its structure rather than its content, is that the ordinary life of an ordinary family contains enough material for comedy that is genuinely funny rather than merely distracting. That Tuesday at the nuclear plant, and the laundry day, and the parent-teacher conference, and the family dinner that almost becomes a crisis and then doesn't quite, all of this is enough. All of this is funny. All of this is worth paying attention to. This permission matters. In a culture that relentlessly valorizes the extraordinary, the achievement, the dramatic story, the life that stands out there is something corrective about a show that says, no, actually, this life, the ordinary one, is full of things worth laughing at and crying at and caring about. The ordinary life is the life most people have. It is worthy of the kind of sustained attention that the show has given it. and it has given us the comfort of return. The knowledge that whenever you need it, the town is there. The light is on, the family is home. You can go back whenever the ordinary world becomes too much, or when you want to spend time with people you know, fictional people, yes, people who do not exist, but people you know in the specific and real way that you know people you have spent time with, and the town will receive you. No questions, no requirements. Just Springfield, as it always is, waiting for the story to begin again. That is what Springfield has given us over 30 years. That is what it gives you tonight. Let it be enough. Let the gift be received. Let yourself be here, in the town that does not exist and that is more real than many places that do, in the light of the house on Evergreen Terrace, in the particular quiet of a Springfield night when everyone has gone home, and the plant is humming, and the tire fire is burning, and the stars are out over a town that is both terrifying and beloved, that is both strange and home, that is both a warning and a comfort, and a mirror and a dream. The Simpsons are on their couch. They are watching television, or they are about to watch television, or the television is watching them. The gag works in multiple directions, and this is, as always, part of the point. You are watching The Simpsons watching television. Or you are not watching anymore. Your eyes are closed. The town is behind them. The story has become the sound of a familiar voice in a familiar place. And the familiar voice is saying, "Rest now. The town will be here. The door is always open. The light is always on. You are home. Springfield is home." The night continues. Bonus Section 6. The Mythology of Homer's Jobs. Homer Simpson has had, by various counts, over 200 different jobs in the course of the show's run. He has been an astronaut, a food critic, a professional boxer, a mob enforcer, a snowplow operator, a bowling alley manager, a monorail conductor, a country music songwriter, a missionary, a pharmacist, a bodyguard, a detective, a guru, a baseball groundskeeper, and dozens of other things that are either impossible to hold simultaneously or impossible to hold at all for a man with Homer's demonstrated limitations. This is, on one level, pure comedy, the absurdist running joke of a character who is perpetually available for any occupation the plot requires. But on another level, it is a portrait of a certain kind of American economic precarity, the kind that looks from the outside like incompetence or bad luck, but that is actually structural. Homer's job mobility is not chosen. Homer is not an entrepreneur exploring career possibilities. Homer is a man without reliable employment security who has found himself repeatedly in the position of needing to find work because his primary job, the job at the plant, has been complicated by one of the various disasters that his life generates around itself. Every time Homer takes a new job in the show, there is a pattern. He discovers a genuine aptitude for the work. He excels briefly. He becomes the best version of himself in the context of this new occupation, often with a speed and totality that suggests he has been underutilized at the plant. And then something goes wrong. Either Homer himself makes a spectacular mistake, or the external circumstances change, or the job simply ends and Homer is back at the plant, or back at the beginning, ready to start again. The cycle is comic in its repetition, but it is also, if you allow it to be, a story about potential. Homer has potential. It surfaces in these episodes the food critic who has a genuine palate, the astronaut who is genuinely brave in the crisis, the boxer who is genuinely capable of absorbing punishment and recovering. Beneath the failure is a person who could be more, who is more in these glimpsed moments, but who is returned each time to the default setting. Sector 7G, the nuclear plant, the same chair, the same console, the same life. The coma theory makes this cycle feel especially meaningful. If Homer is dreaming, then the dozens of occupations he tries in his dream are his mind's way of giving him the life he couldn't have while he was awake. The safety inspector gets to be an astronaut. The man who was told he wasn't good enough for anything else gets to discover, in the dream, that he is good enough for everything. Every job Homer tries is the dream offering him a version of himself that his waking life did not permit. And every time the dream returns him to the plant, it is because the plant is what Homer actually knows. The plant is the architecture of his working life, the thing his memory has to return to when the adventure ends. You can take Homer out of the plant in the dream, but the plant is where the dream keeps his baseline. That is both sad and strangely tender. The dream gives him everything and still keeps bringing him back to what he knows. Because what he knows is what he has. And the dream is built from what he has. Breathe with that for a moment. The idea that what you have can be the foundation of an enormous dream. That the ordinary life, even the limited one, is the material of something much larger than it appears. Homer's life is narrow in the ways that working-class lives in post-industrial American cities are narrow. But the dream built from that narrowness is enormous and improbable, and full of music and celebrity and space travel and everything the ordinary life does not contain. Dreams are generous. They work with what they have and make more of it than seems possible. Let yours do that now. Let the material of your day, whatever it contained, become the raw material of something larger. Let the ordinary facts of your life be transformed by the alchemy of sleep into something that your waking mind could not have produced on its own. That is what Homer's coma is, if the theory is true. That is what sleep is always for all of us. The material of the life you have lived, transformed by the mind you carry, into the dream you need. Final bonus section, the letter to Springfield. If you could write a letter to Springfield, not to any specific character, but to the town itself, to the place, what would it say? I think it would say something like this. Thank you for being there. For being there the way certain things are there quietly, without demanding recognition for their presence, available when needed and receding when not. Thank you for being the place that demonstrated over 30 years that ordinary life is interesting enough to look at this closely. That a family in a mid-sized American city with a complicated relationship to their local nuclear facility contains more story than most epics. That the particular quality of a Tuesday afternoon in a house where people love each other imperfectly is worth the kind of attention you have given it. Thank you for the characters who felt real, who felt like they had lives extending beyond the frame, histories that preceded the stories you told about them, futures that were implied rather than depicted. Thank you for making Homer Simpson someone you could be angry at and root for in the same breath. Thank you for making Marge Simpson's patience feel like strength rather than submission. Thank you for giving Bart his loyalty and his fear and his moments of genuine heroism, and for giving Lisa her genius and her loneliness and her stubborn refusal to become smaller. And thank you for Maggie for the watching, for the silence, for the suggestion that the most extraordinary thing in the room might be the thing you are least likely to look at. Thank you for Burns, who is the villain the show needed, not a simple monster, but a specific one, a man whose badness is the precise distillation of certain real badnesses that exist in the world, concentrated into a form that lets you see them clearly. Thank you for Ned, who showed what happens when you try to be good in a world that doesn't reward goodness, and who kept trying anyway. Thank you for Mo, and for Apu, and for Ralph, and for all the secondary people who made the town feel like a town, rather than a backdrop. Thank you for the floating timeline, which gave us permanent return, for the couch that is always there, for the house on Evergreen Terrace with the light always on. Thank you for the music that plays and the animation that has evolved but never lost itself, and the particular combination of warmth and strangeness that makes Springfield feel like the only fictional place in the world that is also somehow a real place. Thank you for 30 years, for being the show that ran long enough to become a mirror, a map, a myth, for being the thing that people who grew up in different countries and different decades and different circumstances have in common, the shared reference point, the place they can both point to and say, that, I know that place. Thank you for the tire fire. Thank you for Blinky. Thank you for the plant, which is terrifying, and for the community that lives in its shadow, which is beloved. Thank you for every episode that ended with the family intact, together, on their couch, or at their table, or in whatever configuration the story left them in, still together, still going, still making it back to Evergreen Terrace before the credits roll. If the town could receive letters, this is what I would send. And now, let this be the end of what needs to be said tonight. The town has been visited, the stories have been told. The dark has been inhabited and found to contain nothing that cannot be held. You are ready to sleep. Your body knows it. The resistance has gone out of your muscles, and your breathing has found a rhythm that is slower than speech, slower than thought, the rhythm of something preparing to go under. Let it go under. Let the day become past, which it already is. Let the night be what it is, the space between one day and the next, the necessary pause, the body's time, the mind's restoration. Springfield is behind you now. The light is on. The family is home. The plant is humming. The river carries its glow. And you are here, in your own bed, in your own night, in your own life, which is like Homer's, like Marge's, like Bart's and Lisa's and Maggie's, ordinary and specific and irreplaceable, and worth every bit of attention you have ever given it. Sleep well. The town will be there in the morning. It always is. End of script. Fall asleep to the entire story of Springfield and why it's terrifying. Deep section. The relationship between Homer and Marge. 30 years of staying. There is a marriage at the center of The Simpsons, and it is, by almost every measure of what marriages are supposed to be, an unlikely one. Homer is not the husband that Marge, in her most honest moments, would have designed for herself. He is not organized. He is not reliably thoughtful. He does not remember anniversaries with any consistency. He prioritizes his own comfort in ways that regularly create problems for the people around him, and he does this not out of malice, but out of a particular obliviousness that has never fully resolved itself, despite 30-some years of living with a woman who has been, in her patient way, trying to teach him better. And yet Marge stays. She has stayed for 30 years of broadcast television, through every reset and every episode that ends with the marriage intact. The show has tested the marriage. There are episodes that push it to breaking point, that have Marge considering what her life would look like if she were not in it, that give her a credible alternative and then pull back. She always pulls back. She always stays. Why? The cynical answer is that the show needs her to stay, because the show is about this family, and this family requires this marriage. The structure demands it. This is true, but it is not interesting. The more interesting answer is that the show, over its long run, has built a case for why Marge stays that is more nuanced than simple love or simple obligation. The case is this. Homer, whatever his failures, is oriented toward Marge. At his center, the center that the coma theory reveals, the center that the dream exposes, Homer is profoundly committed to Marge. He does not always demonstrate this well. He frequently fails to demonstrate it at all, but it is there, and Marge can feel it, and the knowledge of it is part of what sustains her through the failures. There is a quality of character that is not the same as good behavior. Someone can behave badly and still have a quality of character that is fundamentally sound, that is oriented toward good things, that wants the right things, that fails on the way to something that, if it were achieved, would be worthy. Homer is this kind of person. He wants to be a good husband. He wants to be a good father. He wants to be a good member of his community. His wanting is genuine. His execution is catastrophically imperfect. But the wanting is there, and Marge has always been able to see it, and the wanting matters. Marge, in turn, has a quality of character that the show has sometimes undervalued but never quite lost track of. She is not just patient. Patience is a capacity. It is not, by itself, a virtue or an interesting quality. What Marge has that goes beyond patience is a specific, developed wisdom about what sustains things over time, what a family needs, what a marriage needs, what a community needs, that she has built from observation and experience and the particular intelligence of someone who pays close attention to the humans around her. Marge knows Homer better than Homer knows himself. This is not a remarkable thing to say about a wife, or at least not a remarkable thing in principle. Spouses often develop this particular asymmetric knowledge of each other. What is remarkable in Marge's case is what she does with the knowledge. She does not weaponize it. She does not use her understanding of Homer's depths to manipulate him, even when manipulation would make her life easier. She holds the knowledge with a kind of care that is its own form of love, the love of really seeing someone and choosing to be with what you see. This is the quiet heroism of Marge Simpson. It does not make good television in the obvious sense. It does not produce episodes. It does not generate plots. It is what holds all the plots together, the steady, caring, imperfect, insistent love of a woman who knows exactly who she married and has decided, daily and deliberately, to keep knowing him. The show has honored this in its best moments. In the episode where Homer temporarily becomes brilliant, smarter than anyone around him, capable of seeing Springfield and his life with total clarity, and finds the clarity unbearable and chooses to return to obliviousness. Marge's reaction to this is not anger or relief. It is something quieter. She sees what Homer chose and why he chose it, and she holds that knowledge too, carefully, with the specific gentleness of someone who understands that the person you love is not always the most functional version of themselves, and that loving them anyway is the work. Let the image of Marge hold you for a moment. Not Marge as the show's background support, not Marge as the long-suffering wife of comedy convention, but Marge as herself, a woman with a rich inner life and a specific intelligence and a capacity for love that is not passive but active, that is not patient waiting but patient building. 30 years of building. The construction of a family and a home and a marriage that, by every conventional measure, should not have survived and has. There is a lesson in that. Not a neat one, not a lesson that resolves into a tidy sentence, but something about the long game, about how staying is sometimes the bravest thing, about how the accumulation of ordinary days, ordinary Tuesday afternoons, ordinary meals and ordinary arguments and ordinary evenings on the couch, how all of that accumulation builds something that is larger than any individual piece of it. Marge has been building this for 30 years. She will keep building it. The house on Evergreen Terrace is her structure, and it holds. Deep Section 2. Bart's loyalty, the thing beneath the pranks. Here is something about Bart Simpson that the comedy of his character sometimes obscures. He is deeply, specifically loyal. Not loyal in the abstract. Loyal in the particular, loyal to the people and things that have earned his loyalty, which is a smaller group than the whole world but a fiercely protected one. When Bart loves something, he loves it with his whole self, without reservation, without the kind of managed emotional distance that more cautious people develop as a protection against loss. When Bart is your friend, he is your friend in a way that means something. This quality makes the comedy of his character more interesting, not less. The pranks and the misbehavior and the spectacular acts of civic disruption, all of this is the surface, the performance, the way Bart has learned to navigate a world that does not always take him seriously. Beneath it is a person who takes seriously the things that matter to him. He takes his friendship with Milhouse seriously, in the specific way of a child who has understood, without being told, that a friend who knows you well is something rare and worth protecting. Milhouse is not cool. Milhouse is not an asset in the social economy of Springfield Elementary. But Milhouse is real to Bart, genuinely known and genuinely knowing, and Bart has never traded that realness for social capital, even though the show has given him opportunities to do so. He takes his family seriously, though he would never say so using those words or in a context where any of them might hear him. His love for Lisa is particularly interesting to trace through the show's history. They fight constantly, in the specific way of siblings who are not quite alike enough to fully understand each other and not quite different enough to be indifferent. But when it matters, Bart is there for Lisa in ways that the show has dramatized beautifully and that land with such weight precisely because they are surprising the mischievous older brother, the underperformer, the boy who seems to care primarily about himself, turns out to care very deeply about his sister. This is the show's most consistent argument about character, that the surface is not the whole story, that the person who presents badly may contain something that does not present at all, that love and loyalty and the capacity for genuine care can live in people who do not know how to make those qualities visible, who have built a persona around them rather than letting them be seen. Bart has built a persona, the bad boy of Springfield Elementary, the terror of the school system, the skateboarder and the troublemaker, and the man who has never passed a test he didn't want to fail. This persona protects him. It keeps the world at a certain distance, keeps the expectations low, keeps him in a position where any genuine expression of care or sensitivity is invisible rather than vulnerable. But when the persona is temporarily set aside in the quiet moments the show gives him, in the episodes that require Bart to be more than the persona, what you find there is worth finding. A person who has been paying attention. A person who feels things deeply and has developed elaborate systems for not showing it. A person who, if the circumstances were different, if Springfield were different, might have had his real capacities recognized and developed and given room to grow. Springfield did not give Bart that. Springfield gave him the persona instead, and Bart, being Bart, has made the most of it. That is a thing to admire, actually, making the most of what you have, building a life from the available materials, living fully in the circumstances you're given rather than the circumstances you would have chosen. Springfield is full of people doing exactly this. Making the most of a town that is not, in most conventional measures, an optimal place to be. Finding within the contaminated, amnesiac, billionaire-haunted community of Springfield something worth staying for, worth building within, worth loving. The town does not deserve its people, probably. Most towns don't, but its people persist in loving it anyway, in the particular stubborn way that people love the place they are from, even knowing everything they know about it. Even knowing about the three-eyed fish and the cracked cooling towers and the billionaire in his tower watching, they know about all of it. They stay, they love. That is actually the most human thing in the whole story. Deep Section 3. The long legacy: what happens after Springfield. Springfield has been going for over 30 years. It will continue for however many more years remain in its run. At some point, the show will end. This is a certainty that the show itself has occasionally acknowledged, with characteristic obliqueness, in episodes that gesture toward the future without committing to it. What happens to Springfield when the show ends? The practical answer is that the show goes into syndication, if it has not already, and into streaming libraries. And it becomes the kind of artifact that people discover and rediscover across generations, the way people continue to encounter classic literature and classic film. New viewers will find the early seasons with the fresh eyes of someone who has not spent 30 years with these characters, and they will fall in love. And they will come to the later seasons with the growing understanding that they are inheriting something, a world with history, a mythology with depth, a place that has meant something to a lot of people for a long time. The characters will persist in the culture the way characters from enduring works of art persist. Homer and Marge and Bart and Lisa and Maggie will continue to be reference points, will continue to be named, will continue to provide the shorthand that the show has given the culture. Burns will continue to be a name for a certain kind of power. Springfield will continue to be a name for a certain kind of place. The town will become truly mythic in the way that only very few fictional places have achieved, the way that Baker Street and Sherwood Forest and Middle-earth are mythic, present in the cultural imagination as something more than settings, as archetypal spaces that represent something about the world beyond themselves. Springfield will be the name for the ordinary American town as it actually is, rather than as it is imagined to be. The name for the place where the plant is humming and the billionaire is watching and the family is on their couch and the river is carrying something that glows. That legacy is already built. It has been building for 30 years. Every episode that airs, every viewer who finds the show for the first time, every new generation that discovers what their parents' generation discovered before them, all of this is building the mythology. Springfield is becoming permanent in the way that permanent things become permanent. Slowly, through accumulation, through being loved and referenced and returned to until the world cannot imagine not having it. There is something consoling in this, if you let it be. The things you love do not simply stop when you stop. They persist. They find new audiences. They continue doing the thing they do, illuminating, entertaining, reflecting, containing long after the specific circumstances of your encounter with them are over. The show you love will outlast your loving of it. Springfield will be there for people you will never know. That is a form of immortality that does not belong to any of the characters, not even Burns with his weekly treatments and his engineered longevity. It belongs to the work itself. It belongs to the accumulated artifact of 30-plus years of someone paying careful attention to the world and rendering that attention in animation and music and voice and story. It belongs to Springfield. Let that be the last thought before sleep, if a thought is needed. Something you love will persist. The world you have inhabited, in all its specific details, will be available to someone else later. Not the same world, not your experience of it, but something that rhymes with it, something that gives them what it gave you. That is what Springfield does. That is what Springfield has always done. It gives you something and you carry it, and someday, someone you haven't met yet will find it and it will give them something too. The chain holds. The light is on. Sleep now. Springfield will be there in the morning. It always, always is. Final word count target reached. Fall asleep to the entire story of Springfield and why it's terrifying. Complete sleep narration script 11 labs optimized. All sections complete. Extended meditation. The weight of Saturday morning Springfield and childhood memory. There is a specific time that Springfield belongs to in the collective imagination, and it is not prime time, even though that is when the show has always aired. In the collective imagination, Springfield belongs to Saturday morning. To the particular quality of Saturday morning light that comes through curtains that haven't been opened yet. to the sound of cartoons playing in the background of a kitchen where cereal is being poured, to the specific freedom of a day that has no requirements yet, that stretches out in front of you with the particular promise of something that is not quite leisure and not quite play, but the childhood form of both, which is simply time that belongs to you. You may not have watched The Simpsons on Saturday morning. It aired on Sunday night at 8 o'clock, which is the time that Sunday nights used to have a particular weight the last hours before Monday, the final hours of the weekend's freedom, the time when the day had a quality of winding down that you could feel even as a child, the particular bittersweet of a Sunday evening. Homer and the family at 8 o'clock on Sunday were part of that time. They were the last good thing before Monday arrived. But the memory of Springfield, for many people who grew up with it, has the texture of Saturday morning regardless of when it was technically watched. Because memory does not always preserve the facts. Memory preserves the feeling. And the feeling of Springfield, of returning to it, of the theme playing, of the couch receiving the family, has the feeling of something comforting and familiar and slightly out of ordinary time. Saturday morning is out of ordinary time. Springfield is out of ordinary time. They belong to the same category of experience. Think about what it felt like to be a child, watching something you loved. There was a quality to that attention that is very hard to recreate in adulthood, a totality of absorption, a surrender to the story, a complete lack of the critical distance that adult viewing brings. You didn't watch the show as a child, analyzing its structure, or noting the quality of the animation, or thinking about what it might say about American culture. You were just in it. You were in Springfield. The story was happening and you were inside it, completely, in the way that children are completely inside things they love. The show preserved that access. For many people, even as they grew up, even as the critical distance arrived, even as you started to see the machinery behind the stories, there was a layer beneath the analysis where you were still in Springfield, still responding to it with something more immediate than thought. The show earned that layer and kept it. It stayed in you even as you developed the capacity to be outside it. That is one of the rarest things a work of art can do. It can be entered as a child and not exited fully when you become an adult. It can maintain your access to a version of yourself that knew only how to love things, not how to evaluate them. It can be a door back. Springfield is a door back. Tonight it has been a door back. Not to Springfield exactly, but to the state of being in a story, the state of following a voice through a series of images and ideas without defending yourself against them, without holding them at arm's length, without managing your response to them. The state of simply receiving. You have been in that state. You are in it now. The story has been going long enough that your critical mind has set its tools down and rested. You are not thinking about what Springfield means or how it was made or what it says about American culture. You are just here. The town is around you in the specific way that familiar places are around you, present, without demanding acknowledgement, there without requiring your attention. Let it stay like that. Let the town stay present without demanding anything. Let it be the background of this particular passage into sleep, neither gone nor urgent, just there, the way Saturday morning used to be there, open and available and without requirements. The cereal is on the table. The curtains are not open yet. The Saturday stretches out in front of you, and the television is playing something familiar, and nothing is required of you at all. Extended. Meditation 2. Burns's loneliness and the price of everything. There is something that the show does with Burns that is easy to miss because the comedy is so effective at blocking it. The comedy of Burns is about power, its absurdity, its cruelty, its particular flavor of ancient and entitled obliviousness. The comedy is good. Burns is one of the show's most reliably funny characters, in the specific way that characters who represent real social forces are funny when they are rendered precisely enough that you recognize the real thing in the cartoon. But beneath the comedy of power is a specific and detailed portrait of what the accumulation of power at the cost of everything else produces in a person. Burns has no friends. He has Smithers, who is devoted to him in a way that is more than professional. But Smithers's devotion is also a form of function. Smithers serves Burns's interests, maintains Burns's life, manages Burns's systems. The relationship is not without genuine feeling on both sides, but it is asymmetrical in ways that preclude it from being the friendship between equals that constitutes the deepest form of human connection. You cannot be fully known by someone who serves you, Because the service creates a power differential that shapes every interaction. Burns has no family. He has history with family. There are episodes that reveal a complicated family background, relatives and a childhood and the early formation of the person he became, but in the present of the show, he is alone in the way that only the very powerful and the very old tend to be alone. He has outlived his contemporaries. He has organized his life around accumulation rather than relationship. He has, through the specific logic of his survival strategy, created conditions that make genuine intimacy structurally impossible. The moments in the show when Burns reaches towards something like human connection are notable precisely because they are so infrequent and so awkward. He does not know how to do it. The capacity has been dormant for so long that when it surfaces wrong in gestures that are misjudged, in expressions of feeling that land strangely, in attempts at kindness that produce confusion in their recipients. Burns trying to be human is a comedy, yes, but it is also a tragedy of atrophy, of a capacity that was not used and has not developed. The price of everything Burns has is everything Burns doesn't have. The loneliness is the cost of the longevity. The isolation is the cost of the power. He has built a life in which he will never run out of resources and will always run out of company. Every person he knew well enough to be lonely without is gone. Every potential companion either serves him or fears him or has been destroyed by him. He is at the top of the structure he built, which is also the most inaccessible point in that structure, the place where you can see everything and touch nothing. This is the show's most uncomfortable insight about wealth. Not that wealth makes you bad. Burns was developing in bad directions before he had any wealth at all, the childhood episodes make clear. But that the particular form of wealth that is never enough, that is always expanding its own logic, that cannot be satisfied and therefore cannot stop accumulating this kind of wealth tends, over time, to hollow out everything around it. The relationships and the communities and the ordinary human texture of a life go quiet, and what's left is the power and the resources and the particular silence of someone who has everything and no one to share it with. Burns is terrifying. Burns is also a cautionary tale about a specific path that is available to people, a path that advertises its destination poorly, that shows you the accumulation without showing you the hollowing. The show puts both on screen simultaneously, which is why Burns is more than a cartoon villain. He is a precise and accurate portrait of what a real version of him would actually be. Let that sit lightly. You don't need to carry it. You just need to see it, and then let it go, because the night is for release and not for holding. Burns is in his office. The town is below him. He has everything, and he is alone. You are in your bed. You may have less than him in the conventional accounting of things, but you have tonight, and tonight has a specific warmth that no amount of power can manufacture. You have the story, and the dark, and the quiet, and whatever is with you in the ordinary way that things are with you when you are being still. That is enough. That is, in fact, quite a lot. Extended Meditation 3. The Grammar of Springfield, How the Show Speaks. There is a specific way that the show tells its stories that has become so familiar it is almost invisible to people who have watched it long enough. But the grammar of the show, the way it structures an episode, the way it handles time and consequence and emotional arc is unusual, and the unusual features of it are worth noticing, because they tell you something about what the show believes about storytelling and about life. Most situation comedies of the show's era had a three-act structure that operated on a clear emotional logic. Establish the problem, escalate the problem, resolve the problem, and return to the status quo. The return to the status quo was important. It guaranteed renewal, guaranteed the characters could do it again next week, guaranteed the audience would not have to carry anything heavy from one episode to the next. The Simpsons inherited this structure and then quietly did something strange to it. The show's episodes often have two completely separate stories, what the fan and critical community calls the A and B plots that may or may not relate to each other thematically, that run in parallel through the episode without necessarily resolving into a unified conclusion. The A plot might be about Homer's latest adventure, the B plot might follow Marge through a separate crisis, and at the end of the episode, both plots have concluded, but the connection between them may be tenuous or purely structural rather than thematic. This is not a flaw. It is a depiction of how life actually works. In real life, the different members of a family have different stories running simultaneously. The family's life is not one story with subplots, it is multiple stories that happen to be lived by people who share a house, who come together at the dinner table or on the couch and bring their separate days into contact. The Simpsons episodes replicate this. They show the family as a collection of separate interior lives that intersect rather than a single unit with a single narrative. The show's relationship to consequence is similarly unusual. The show does not carry most of its episode-to-episode consequences forward. This is the reset function that the coma theory and the collective denial theory both address in different ways. But it also means that the show can be entered at any point, that there is no prerequisite knowledge, that the story is always beginning again. This is a particular grammar of storytelling, the grammar of the anthology, of the tale that completes itself, of something you can pick up and put down without losing the thread. Most episodic television now works differently. It builds arcs, maintains consequences, requires commitment across many episodes to get the full experience. The Simpsons is one of the last major shows to maintain the older grammar, the grammar of the self-contained episode, the story that is complete in itself. And this grammar has a specific effect on the viewer. It makes the show feel inexhaustible because there is always a beginning available, always a place to enter, always a story that will complete itself in 22 minutes and leave you exactly where you started. This is the grammar of myth. The stories of mythology are also self-contained, also complete in themselves, also available for entry at any point. You do not need to have read the previous volume of Greek mythology to understand a particular story about Heracles or Odysseus. Each story carries its own weight. Each story is whole. Springfield has become mythological in this sense. The stories of Springfield are complete in themselves, and also part of an enormous interconnected web of stories that rewards the reader who enters it deeply enough. The casual viewer gets the self-contained episode. The devoted viewer gets the mythology. You get both tonight. You have the whole of Springfield behind you, the accumulated weight of 30 years of storytelling. And you also have just this specific hour, this specific story, this voice moving through the dark toward the place where you will sleep. Both are available. Both are real. Springfield holds them simultaneously. Let it hold you the same way. The very last words. You have been in Springfield for a long time tonight. You have been in the plant, in the office at the top, in the parking lot where Burns was shot, and in the parking lot of the hospital where Homer may still be dreaming. You have been on Evergreen Terrace, in the yellow house, in the kitchen where Marge is always doing something that holds the household together. You have been in the school where Lisa plays the saxophone too loud and too beautifully for the institution to contain. You have been on the street at night with Bart, in the freedom of the unofficial hours. You have been in the crib where Maggie watches and waits and accumulates everything she will eventually deploy. You have been in the deep structure of the place, the theories that the show invites and does not confirm, the dark readings that live beneath the comedy, the things the town knows about itself and refuses to say out loud. You have been in the mythology of a fictional place that has become real enough that millions of people carry it around inside them, one of the most successful acts of collective imagination in the history of American culture. And now you are back in your own bed, in your own night, in your own life, which is real in ways that Springfield is not, and which is yours in ways that Springfield cannot be, and which contains its own mysteries and its own dark readings and its own theories about what is really going on beneath the surface. Your own Springfield, your own house with its own particular light, your own relationships with their own specific qualities, your own work and your own worries and your own couch where you land at the end of the day. It is ordinary. It is specific. It is yours. Let it be beloved in the way that Springfield is beloved, not despite its strangeness and its darkness and its imperfection, but including all of those things. Let the whole of it be something you can hold with warmth, even the complicated parts, even the parts that are hard to love, even the parts that would make more sense if someone explained them to you. Springfield makes more sense if someone explains it to you. Your life makes more sense if someone explains it to you. But the explaining can wait. The explaining is for the day, which has not yet arrived. Right now, there is just the night. There is just this, the dark and the quiet and the particular weight of a body ready to sleep, and the town somewhere behind you still going, the plant humming, the family in their house, the tire fire burning, the river carrying its glow, the baby in her crib dreaming whatever babies dream. Sleep is available to you now. It has been waiting patiently this whole time. It is patient in the way of things that know they will get what they're waiting for. It does not rush. It does not demand. It simply stays close, available, ready to receive you the moment you stop resisting it. You have stopped resisting, or you are close. The story has taken you almost all the way there. The town is behind you. Your eyes are closed. Your breathing is slow and even and will soon become the breathing of sleep. Springfield is somewhere in the dark, still going, still yellow, still strange, still beloved. And you are here. And everything is fine. Sleep well. END. Coda. One more night in Springfield. Because you are still here. Because sleep has not taken you yet, or because you came back, or because the story found a way to stay with you past the ending. This happens. Some nights the mind needs a little more. Some nights you reach the end of something and the quiet that follows is too complete, too sudden, and the story needs to breathe a little longer before the silence can hold you. So here is a little more. A few more minutes in the town. A few more images to carry you down. Picture the night in Springfield specifically, not the day, with its activity and noise, and the constant human business of a place where things are always happening. The night. The specific quality of a Springfield night, which has a certain character that daytime Springfield does not have. The streetlights on Evergreen Terrace come on at dusk and stay on until dawn, and they cast a particular amber over the street that softens everything, that makes the houses look warmer than they probably are, that turns the ordinary suburban geometry of the block into something almost beautiful. The grass between the sidewalk and the curb, slightly overgrown in front of the Simpson house and immaculately maintained in front of the Flanders house, goes dark and silver and looks nothing like it looks in the daytime. The trees, which have leaves in summer and bare branches in the show's winter episodes, are still in the windless Springfield night. The houses are quiet. Most of the lights are off. The Simpsons house has the blue flicker of the television coming through the living room curtains. Someone left it on, or Homer fell asleep in front of it again, and the screen is playing something that no one is watching, throwing its light into the room without a receiver. The Flanders house is dark. Ned has prayed and gone to sleep at a reasonable hour, as he always does, as the orderly shape of his life requires. Somewhere down the street, Moe's Tavern has its sign on the neon letters in red, Tavern, because the full name doesn't fit on the sign in a way that looks right. The sign buzzes slightly, the particular buzz of old neon, the frequency of something that is constantly working to maintain its glow. Inside, Moe is wiping down the bar with a rag that is not quite clean, in the ritual end-of-night way of bartenders everywhere. The last customer left an hour ago. The jukebox has been silent for 40 minutes. Moe is alone with the smell of the bar and the sound of the refrigerator and the particular piece of a person who has closed up something they are responsible for and can now rest. The power plant on the edge of town is the most active thing at this hour. It does not sleep. Reactors do not sleep. The hum that is always present, always the baseline frequency of Springfield's existence, is somehow more perceptible at night when the other sounds have gone quiet. From certain streets, if you stand still and listen, you can hear it not loud, not alarming, just there, the background note. The town's own heartbeat, generated by the machine that keeps the lights on. Homer, in his hospital bed, if the coma theory is true, is breathing evenly. His dream has gone quiet for now. The elaborate adventures have settled into something calmer. The way sleep cycles through stages and the dreams of the lighter stages are gentler, less structured, more like impressions than stories. He is dreaming of the house, probably, of the particular smell of it, of Marge's presence somewhere close, the warmth of her, the specific comfort of someone you have slept beside for a very long time. Marge herself is asleep. She sleeps lightly, she always has. The sleep of someone who remains partially available to the needs of the household, even in unconsciousness. The sleep of a mother who learned to wake at the sound of children needing something. But tonight all the children are quiet and Homer is wherever Homer is, and the house is as still as it gets. And Marge has gone deeper than usual, into the kind of sleep that is genuinely restorative, that she does not get often enough. Bart is in his bed. This is remarkable only because it is accurate. He is actually in his bed, actually asleep, the skateboard leaning against the wall and the posters on his walls slightly visible in the ambient light from the street. His face in sleep is younger than his face in waking, as everyone's face is younger in sleep. The performance is suspended. The bravado, the performance of indifference, the careful management of how he is seen, all of it rests when Bart rests. What's underneath is just a boy. A boy who loves his family more than he can say and who says it, daily, in ways that don't look like saying it. Lisa has her saxophone case open beside her bed because she was playing late and ran out of energy before she could put it away properly. She is asleep with her cheek resting on her hand in a way that will probably leave a mark, and she is dreaming about something that requires her to think. The kind of dream where the mind keeps working even in sleep, keeps following a line of reasoning towards somewhere it has not yet arrived. She will wake up tomorrow with something she couldn't find the night before. Sleep gave it to her. Sleep always gives it to her. She trusts it, even when she doesn't think to name the trust. And Maggie in her crib, the nightlight in her room casts a warm circle on the ceiling, and the room is the quiet of a room that contains someone very small and very still. Her breathing is the sound of absolute trust, the breath of someone who has not yet learned to be afraid of the night, who does not know yet that the dark contains anything other than sleep. She will learn this, eventually, but not yet. For now, the dark is simply the dark, and the dark is simply what comes after the light, and she breathes in it without fear. All of them are there, in the house, in their specific sleeps, in the specific Springfield night, and the night holds them. The way nights hold towns without effort, without preference, impartially. The night does not care that the river glows, or that the plant hums, or that the man in the tower is still awake, still thinking, still planning. The night holds all of it with the same impartial patience that it holds everything. The darkness is not frightening. The darkness is the holder. The darkness is where you rest. You are in the darkness now, or close to it. The brightness of the day is hours away. The obligations and the noise and the requirements, all of that is hours away, across an expanse of sleep that your body is ready to cross. Let it carry you. The town is behind you. The night is around you. Springfield is somewhere in the dark, still going, still yellow, still strange, still stubbornly, persistently beloved. The tire fire burns, the reactor hums, the family sleeps, and you are here, breathing evenly, being held by the particular dark of your particular night, safe, still, home.